All right, good evening, everyone. Today is actually, it's not Thursday. Today is the rescheduled Monday, March 6th SAU board meeting from the original date of Thursday, February the 23rd. We're going to call this meeting to order. Current time is 6 p.m. We're going to start off our session with the first of three public comment periods. Inviting members of the public to come up here to the microphone. Just hit the on button, turn that light from red to green, and then the floor will be yours for 3 minutes. So if any members of the public in person would like to address the board, just come right up to the microphone. Great, Julie, if you could just state your name, town in which you reside, and then you'll have the floor for 3 minutes.
We go.
Now it is.
It's on. Thank you. My name is Julie Smiley. I'm from Amherst, New Hampshire. I have an 8th grader and a junior in high school. And I know we've been talking about start times for a number of years now, and I see it's on the agenda tonight. So I just wanted to advocate for keeping the start time as currently is, with the high school kids getting to school later. Just this week, there's been a CDC study that's been released on the crisis, the mental health crisis for teenagers. It's at record levels. It's skyrocketing. Suicide ideation, depression, anxiety are all skyrocketing. And I think we all know that there is a correlation between lack of sleep and adverse mental health consequences. The American Medical Association, the CDC, and the AAP, the American Academy of Pediatrics, have all released statements advocating strongly that children, especially teenagers, because of their biorhythms, need to go to school later in order to get the requisite sleep, which is a minimum of 9 hours. That would entail a teenager being in bed around 8:30 p.m. in order to get up in time for buses, which can come as early as 6 a.m. in Amherst. And so we can see that I think there's been some discussion that there's no academic benefit to the sleep, that sleep has resulted in the kids having no academic benefit. Excuse me. And I think it's impossible to really gauge that given the circumstances our schools have been teaching under in the last 2 years with COVID, remote schooling, hybrid, kids missing school. We absolutely cannot effectively gauge kids' academic performance in relation to start times based on that period of time because of the other disruptions. And I believe the data that was collected shows that parents of middle and high school and students all support the later start times. And I'm going to close with a statement from the American Medical Association, who I think we would all agree are experts on science and medical effects and mental health. Sleep deprivation is a growing public health issue affecting our nation's adolescents, putting them at risk for mental, physical, and emotional distress and disorders. Scientific evidence strongly suggests that allowing adolescents more time for sleep at the appropriate hours results in improvements in health, academic performance, behavior, and general well-being. We believe delaying school start times will help ensure middle and high school students get enough sleep, and that it will improve the overall mental and physical health of our nation's youngest people. While implementing a delayed school start time can be an emotional and potentially stressful for school districts, families, and members of the community, the health benefits for adolescents far outweigh any potential negative consequences. So, thank you.
Great, thank you. Any other members of the public wish to address the board that are in person before we go to those who are online? We will have another public comment period right around our school start time conversation as well. Let's move online here. Any members of the public who are attending via Zoom who wish to address the board, go ahead and raise your hand through the raise your hand feature. Sure. Yes, please. And we have Miss Marilyn Gibson. Miss Marilyn Gibson, can you hear me? Miss Gibson, you're on mute.
Many things floating
Great.
across my screen.
There you go, Miss Gibson. We can hear you now.
Okay,
Please go ahead
thank
and state your name, the town in which you reside, and our policy does show that we do need to see you visually to make sure it is you.
I'm just assuming my visual was on, but one moment, please.
Sure.
Okay, I think we're good.
Perfect. We can see you. Awesome. You have the floor for 3 minutes after you state your name and address. Well, actually, town in which you reside.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate the ability to have some interaction with the board, so thank you very much for that on a virtual mode. First of all, I would like to say, I know there's been a lot of controversy or discussion about the website. I do not find it user-friendly. I think I sent a message to 2 or 3 people today about how to locate the board agendas and time and whatnot. So I apologize for that. I feel that I'm simply not seeing it user-friendly. But moving on, I'd like to know where and what your definition is of SEL. Where is it embedded? In what lessons? I know the answer previously was in such forms as Eagle. I don't see it anywhere in the curriculum, so I'm looking for that information. Also, there was a persistent lack of high school curriculum loaded on not only to the website, but recorded and placed in the brick schoolhouse. And I'd like to have that one of the focuses. I know Mr. Chamberlain had just said that it was approved. I sent Mr. Chamberlain an image of the curriculum I got last year, and it is not like anything I see on our website for the high school. So I'd like that to get some attention, please. Also, I have student services. Meg Beauchamp has done a great job as its director. However, I do have a comment. I asked her last year about some sort of evaluations for the children who pass through the services. I know I can't get IEPs. That's ridiculous. You know, I can't see individual IEPs. It's all privacy. However, there is no way to see what that child has done in order to meet its IEP goals. And there is no way in the district nor in the state that measures or analyzes the successes of IEP students. And I'd like to encourage special services, student services, to try to formulate some sort of a data that we can use as taxpayers. I also recommend that we continue to improve upon communication. I know there has been a lot done this past year. I think I've pretty much pushed that so far to a level that is, I would say, good. On a scale of 1 to 4, I would imagine that would be 3, keeping with the standards of New Hampshire education. Otherwise, I would like to continue to see the school board push back a lot on the teachers' compensations. I would also like to see pushback and a moratorium on PD, not the one granted by the teachers' contracts, but by the district itself. I would like to see the district.
Skip some. We're at 3 minutes. I'll give you a
Okay.
30-minute extension to wrap up.
Oh, 30 minutes. Thank you. I appreciate that.
30 seconds. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Lastly, the PD money that is invested in our community should be considered under a moratorium. I'd like the materials that are now purchased be used by the school for the next 3 years, the district, 39. We purchase no more books and continue to use those to see if any improvement especially in English and math, is being attained by our students. Thank you.
Great.
I appreciate it. I appreciate it. Thank you very much. Have a good evening, everybody.
Thank you. And any other members of the public that would like to address the board in person or on Zoom? Again, if you're online, just use the raise your hand feature and the superintendent will go ahead and move you over to the panel. Seeing none, we're going to move on. And we also have one of our board members joining us remotely. Ms. Beam, if you can just go ahead and tell us that it was impossible for you to be here and that you are in an area where you can speak and that you're alone.
I am alone and I am trying hard to stay awake. It's midnight in Italy, but we have some important things on the agenda tonight. So happy to join remotely.
Thank you, Ms. Beam. All right, moving along to our consent agenda. There's 4 items on the consent agenda. We'll go through one by one, see if there's any issues, and then we'll go ahead and vote with one. So anybody have any issues with number 1 on the consent agenda? Number 2? Number 3? And number 4? And seeing none, let's go ahead and entertain a motion to accept the consent agenda. Mr. Gronstra, second. Seconded by Mr. Vayu. We're going to do a roll call vote, starting off with Mr. Torres.
Torres, yes. Glover, yes. Vayu, yes.
Peters, yes. Grund, yes. Delay Zimmerman, yes.
O'Keefe, yes.
Conklin, yes.
Parisi, yes.
White, yes.
Lawrence, yes.
Gothier, yes.
And Ms.
Beam, yes.
Thank you. That motion carries. We're going to then move on to our board chair updates. Start off in the town of Amherst. Mr. Gothier.
Yes, thank you, Mr. O'Keefe. I'm glad Terry name dropped that she was in Italy to rub it in for us all. So thank you, Terry. I hope the pizza is very bad for you. So I want to just touch on, we have 8 days left until voting day. A couple of things, we're just continuing our final pushes for information on the warrant articles that we do have. There is quite a bit on the ballot for us this year. Goals of avoiding a default budget for a second straight year, contracts with the teachers and with the support staff, and our capital reserve fund contribution as well. Obviously, the big one, though, is Article 12, which will be the major school project, the major renovations at Wilkins. So we certainly are not immune to the fact that this is a very heavy project. It's a weighty project, but it's certainly not something that we put on there lightly. We did this last year and then modified it. This district has been dealing with this issue probably since Clark Wilkins School was first built, with the lack of a cafeteria in that building and needing to go back the next year to get more money from taxpayers to build a cafeteria. It starts there. And then I think just a comedy of, I don't want to say errors, but for a lack of a better term, I'll say that just over the years in terms of how we've dealt with facilities, but in particular, the last 30 years, this has been a chronic issue. Victoria has a piece coming out in the Citizen this month that will outline some of that. Just asking, when does this stop trying to be a piecemeal effort, and when will this be a comprehensive effort to be able to fix this once and for all, or at least for the rest of our lifetimes, and probably a lot of our kids' lifetimes, and certainly if they stick around, maybe even some of their kids will get through in this new building as well. So this is the project that we have on there. We certainly think it's important for this district, for this town, to be able to approve this project. Again, we would not have put it on there had we thought otherwise. It is a lot of money. That's not a hidden fact in this, but I will add, and this is not meant as a threat, but it's the reality of the situation. We're going to spend money on these buildings one way or the other. Do we continue to piecemeal it? Do we do 5 million here, 10 million here, 100,000 here to be able to go along and still have the same space issues that we have? Do we get more trailers? Do we have, because that's what they are. They're trailers. We can call them portables, but they're trailers. They're double wides that sit out back. Do we get more of those? Do we continue to have security risks in the presence, in the back of our minds with these trailers for the next 20 years? So money is going to be spent somewhere, but what is the comprehensive solution that we really want to put together to be able to take care of this facilities once and for all? We do have a couple of tours of Wilkins available this week after school gets out, so you can really see the building not in action with students, but certainly as close as you're going to get to that, seeing where the teachers are active, what these buildings look like when they're occupied to some extent. Those will be on Wednesday this week from 3 to 4 p.m. There will be one at Clark, and then there'll be one at Wilkins. You should have time to hit both. They're only a half a mile apart if you wanted to go visit those, but certainly Wilkins is the one that's of most importance right now, because that's the one that is the centerpiece of our facility solution in the long term. Lastly, I will also mention that as you can see on Facebook, there's a lot of talk about all of these articles, including how do we value in education. This is something that's very important to us. It goes beyond just test scores. As Ms. Gibson just mentioned, there's how do we measure the outcome of the special services programming, the quote unquote value you get out of that by having it in district. So we are putting together with the new superintendent when that time comes over the course of the next 6 months, because we can explain it in pieces here and there, but essentially, we just want to have a binder. Somebody asks us this question, bam, we slap it together, hand it to them in print, or send it to them in an email, and it has every metric that's there and that's imaginable. It's not an easy project to come up with this, because it does go beyond just test scores, but that is something that we are certainly working on and is a priority going forward, because we realize it is a bit of a lacking thing that we have right now, not being able to hand over something to somebody other than a test score to say, this is how we value that. So it is an ongoing project, but something that we recognize is important as well. So I think I went longer than my time, but thank you with voting day just 8 days away.
Thank you, Mr. Gothier. Let's go to the booming metropolis of Mount Vernon to Ms. Lawrence.
Thank you. So our last meeting was on February 8th, immediately after our deliberative session. We likewise presented our budget, presented our warrant articles. We have a little bit of an increase this year, which is difficult to present to our community, but I felt that it was met with respect, and everyone seems to have a pretty good understanding of the drivers behind our increase. Our main change in warrant articles, we do have one warrant article requesting some funds, about up to $60,000 for our middle school secondary study issue. And that's a kind of a big thing for our community. If the community does not support that at this time, we really can't go forward with any additional moves there. We won't know what anything looks like in Mount Vernon. Can we support a middle school? Can we not? What might that look like for our community? So that's the one article that is a little up for debate on whether or not that will get supported. But other than that, our property maintenance, we expect, or we hope that the community will continue to support that so we can maintain our facilities appropriately. Thanks.
Sure, thank you. So our February meeting started off with a presentation from our math domain leader. It was very exciting to see, again, a refresh, a deep look into our curriculum in math and the different pathways that kids can make it through Sohegan in math. She's created different pathways that's new. And so it's good to hear that we're trying to reach all students in the way that works best for them. So if you're interested, look at our last meeting and watch it online. It's good information. We also had a discussion with our athletic director regarding athletics and start times and things that she has been able to try and work with other schools. So that's, that was definitely a good discussion to have with her to understand where she stands. We're excited. Our robotics team started their competitions again. This has been a couple years since they've been able to go. And they won the Innovation in Control Awards. So, congrats to them. We have Hype coming up where our students lead a discussion usually about 1,100 students up at UNH, and they pick a topic and they go into deep discussions in small groups throughout the day. So, good. We're excited for that happening. We wanted to say thank you to our generous community. We've had some extremely nice donations to the high school recently. So I want to say thank you to our community for all of that. Cell phone proposal went through community council, and with our students, faculty, community members, they came up with a proposal that works, that is consistent for the school, that all teachers will be able to follow with their own nuances. Traditional Sohegan way. But, really proud of the students and the faculty and the community working through that proposal to see something that we can work together on. Our principal search has started, and Mike has filled us in on the process of that. And he's in the process of getting resumes. They'll be reaching out because it will involve the community. It will involve students and faculty and administration, everybody. So if you're interested in participating, please look for his announcements on how to get involved. We held 2 public hearings, one in Amherst, one in Mount Vernon. The Mount Vernon one, one of the petitioners came up and we had a really good discussion about the tax impact and just so he understood more where we were coming from. We understood where he was coming from. So we appreciate that conversation that occurred. Successful Fang Fest. That was a good one. The kids, they ended up with a really good celebration on Friday, including a milk chugging contest and musical chairs and a few other fun, exciting dances. So proud of the administration as well who participate in that dance. So that was a lot of fun on Friday. And then lastly, I just want to say thank you to Pim. Pim, this is his last meeting. He won't be at our meeting on Thursday, but 13 years of serving as a Weekend School Board. So we want to say we'll miss you.
Thank you, Pam. And were you able to chug milk as well, or?
No, thank you. Not interested.
Awesome. Great things going on in our school system. Thank you very much, guys. We're going to next move on to our DARE discussion. So multiple members of the committee have reached out to several board members here over the past year, requesting that we revisit this curriculum. And so I'm going to introduce Sergeant Dano of the Mount Vernon Police Department. If you can just come up here to the microphone and introduce your fellow presenters, that would be greatly appreciated. We have representatives from Amherst and Mount Vernon, and I believe the state DARE program as well.
Good evening. I'm Sergeant Daniel from the Mount Vernon Police Department. I'm here with Lieutenant Champoli from the Amherst Police Department, Officer Sarah from the Amherst Police Department, and Detective Sergeant Perot from the New Hampshire State Police.
Awesome. Gentlemen, if you'd like to just grab some chairs, bring it around that central mic so everyone online can hear you as well, that'd be greatly appreciated. Actually, John, if you can grab a second mic over there as well, just maybe put that closer, or George, I'm sorry.
This one's on.
There we go. Perfect. Oh, mic time.
Good evening. So we did get an email from the board and it had a lot of bulleted points on there. So we figured we'd let the board try to guide us in what they would like to know instead of just diving right in, because it could be a lot of information. We could be here for a very long time. So I figured we'd let the board start and kind of give us an idea where they'd like to start and where they'd like to head. Certainly. So in the town of Mount Vernon, we only go up to K-6. So we do the elementary school program in 5th grade. And once they graduate from 5th grade there, they spend 6th grade in Mount Vernon. They head on down to Amherst, where they used to be handed off to a 7th grade DARE officer, but I believe that program's on pause for the time being.
Yeah, correct.
Amherst also teaches a 5th grade DARE program, and the program, it started, I gotta do math, 40 years ago in 1983, but it's not the same program it was in 1983. Our current program, at least in 5th grade, we talk about risks, consequences, peer pressure, communication styles. We spend one 45-minute block discussing alcohol and tobacco, but really the bulk of the program is a little bit of classroom lecture, a lot of pair work, a lot of group work, a lot of work as a class. And we talk about confidence, communication, and a whole bunch of other stuff unrelated to drug abuse resistance education, which is the name of the program that just, when it came about in 1983, and the name stuck, the program's greatly evolved over time. We can, that might be better left to our state representative to kind of dive into that. Yes.
What's that? Is this on? Turn it around.
Okay, there we go. Okay. Well, excuse me. Thank you for inviting me. So I can talk a little bit about it. So DARE, again, Sergeant Dano expressed that it was started in 1983 in Los Angeles, and it has had multiple changes through the year. I became DARE certified in 2008. I went through a curriculum change shortly after that. And in 2013, Keeping It Real curriculum came into play. So DARE really is the delivery mechanism for the Keeping It Real program, which is more about good decision-making, life skills than it is about just say no to drugs.
So it's very interactive. There is a little bit of PowerPoint presentations, which include PowerPoints, usually definitions of certain words we're concentrating on for the day, some video presentations, but the bulk of classroom is me or Officer Sarah interacting with the students working in pairs and in groups, and then classroom work all together. It's not a 45-minute block of one of us standing up in the front of the room, pointing at a whiteboard or pointing at a PowerPoint saying this, and that. It's more of an interactive discussion that we take place and involved with a workbook, which I did bring the current workbook and the old curriculum workbook, which Sergeant Perot said changed in, give or take, 2013. They do some research, and obviously there's some lag time because they do some research with some national universities. The program in about 2013, they dropped references in the 5th grade program to marijuana. They dropped references to alcohol advertising. They dropped references to inhalants because they did some research and found out those were not reaching that specific age group. When we do our classroom lecture portion, we usually push certain definitions of the day. I happen to have DARE class this morning. Our topic of the day was risks and consequences. Risks like your best friend wants to copy your homework. What do you do? What are the risks? What are the consequences? Kind of instructing them that there's positive and negative consequences to anything. They do play some games in class. They do fill out a workbook. We do have some games towards the end. And then there's usually there is some physical activity at some point in the later lessons where they're up and moving around the room instead of just listening to me bore them for an hour.
Yeah, so I think the another aspect of this that assists my job as the school resource officer for the middle school is it gives me an opportunity to build a relationship with the students at 5th grade. So one of the things that I like is we are part of our lesson is something called the DARE box. So students will go up and they'll put a question in, and it can be about DARE. 9 times out of 10 has nothing to do with DARE, and it's actually just about policing and what we do, how we protect the community, and it kind of gets that conversation rolling with them to see us as hey, we're not these robots that just go around. And I've found, this is my 2nd year at the middle school, the relationships that I've built from that time with them, that one-on-one time in the classroom, teaching, learning from their experiences has been invaluable. I think, especially with Sergeant Daniel up at Mount Vernon, when he's out in the community, the students will come up to us and remind us or bring up things that we talked about in the classroom. So it's kind of beyond the curriculum. It's more or less building those relationships, bridging that gap between students and and law enforcement in general.
For those of you who don't know, Officer Sarah mentioned the DARE box. At the very beginning of DARE, we have the students make a classroom box. It's usually made out of a shoebox. It's where the students can put suggestions, questions, anything, and they can do it anonymously. Most of the time, it's what's your favorite color? What's your favorite food? Sometimes I ask about DARE class, but we also point out they can put anything they want in there, but being the nature of our job, if they put something in there that's of concern, we do have to address it. And I have in the past gotten questions about bullying and so forth. And I've pulled the teachers aside so they can address it as applicable, because we're not equipped to deal with bullying problems when they bring them to us. That is something we'd have to turn over to the school, because they'd be better equipped to handle bullying in the school, in a school setting.
What would you say that is a way that you guys measure results? How do you measure success?
So I'm not an expert on it. I'm Captain Champoli from Amherst PD. I'm the support division captain, and I take care of our entire resource program. But I think the most important job that I have is a father. I'm a father of 3 kids that go through the Amherst school system. My son, who is a 6th grader, we just recently had a talk. So when you talk about results. Results are difficult to measure with something like this because there really isn't a whole lot of empirical data that I could come up with right now with statistics that are going to show us, in which cases this, particular lesson plan had an impact on the student. What I can tell you is that I've had numerous talks with my son and some of his friends about the program, and asking them to be brutally honest with, which again is something that it's unique because there's often a lot of things that we do in police work that I don't know how many times I've been able to help, and it's some of these smaller interventions that they're seeing within the school, which can have a dramatic impact. And anecdotally, my son, when I asked him, I said, well, give me one thing that you would change if this was put in your court and you had something you could do to improve our DARE program. He said, oh yeah, there is a huge problem with the DARE program. I said, oh boy, this is going to be good. It's not taught at every grade level, was his response. He loves the program, and he doesn't just love it because I'm his father. He gave me specific examples of things that he had learned there, which some of them are personal, and I wouldn't be able to share unless I wanted to lose my son as a friend. But I would tell you that the examples that he gave me and how they correlated directly to whatever piece of the curriculum was taught that particular day and how he was able to use it so quickly. It was eye-opening for me because I'm in my 40s and I did the DARE program in Massachusetts, if my accent didn't come through. And it was all about drugs. So to hear from him, and the drug piece was such a small piece of what he highlighted and what some of his friends had highlighted to me. So it's one of those, it's difficult for us to say that, but I will also tell you that as a supervisor, I also am open to any programs that we could intertwine with what we're doing right now. So my hope in anything that we did here tonight wasn't going to be anything. We're not on the defensive, and we're always open to new ideas. So if there are other programs that are out there and there are pieces of those programs or a program that we could bring to the table, we're always happy to do that. Obviously, we would be looking at all aspects of it, but the more that we can get any of our personnel within the classroom setting with the kids is great. So we have a very open mind about it. So I'm happy that this is going the way it is thus far, because I really don't want this to be something that we are on the defensive about keeping a program. But any modifications that we can make moving forward to add things to it, I think everybody wins. So does anybody have anything on empirical data? Okay.
I'll open up to the board because I know we've got a whole bunch of questions here in the next meeting, but and then we've got other questions I've got from other followers. And then here, like we do that. There's actually a question.
A question for Mr. Chamberlain. When we talk about rotating through core fifth grade classes in 10 periods, so does that mean that it's in math class one day and English class the next day? Is that?
They spread it out as much as possible.
Okay. Okay. So the idea is to sort of like we do with, when we no longer just skip days when we have snow days or whatever. The idea is to not just impact the same class.
Exactly.
Okay. Thank you.
So if I may interrupt, I understand that's how it works at down in Amherst. In Mount Vernon, we actually use the guidance counselor's time instead of interfering with any core subjects like math and science and English. So the guidance counselor, she goes in and I just had a chat with her about this today. She goes in, she does her guidance time where she has a process which she instructs the students on how to make healthy and responsible decisions, called something different. But DARE also has a process which we use to help students make decisions about anything in life. And then following DARE class, they go right back into their what I need time, because we tend to schedule at the end of the day where they do all the core classes earlier in the day. So the guidance counselor opens up her time for me, and she actually joins me from time to time in class because she does a bit in her guidance time on bullying, We also talk about bullying in DARE, and I also incorporate some of the terms they use that are school specific and add them to the DARE program when we get to that part, because I know what the guidance counselor does talk about at certain points of her curriculum.
Thank you. Ms. Beam.
Hi, first I want to thank you for coming out tonight to speak with us. And I think it's so excellent to hear about relationship building and decision making, because I feel like everything that we do comes down to relationship building in some way. And I think that our partnership with the RSROs and our police departments is a very positive one. And I know that in some states and some districts, it's less positive. It's seen as more of a threatening presence, where here I do think it's a very positive support to what we do. And I thank you for all that you do for our students and with our students. I'm really happy to hear that you're open to looking at maybe how we can take the pieces of a more evolved DARE program and how it's currently working, and see how we could couple with maybe some other programs that are out there, because I think it's always good to take stock and look at what's available and see what makes sense. And so I would like to offer to be on a subcommittee with some community members and some other interested people and with some of you, to see if maybe we can just decide, is DARE everything we'd like it to be? Could it be coupled with something else and be even better? Because I think that we're constantly evaluating our curriculum and what we do, and this should be no different.
Great, thank you. Anybody else? Gentlemen, can you talk a little bit about the cost associated with the program in terms of out-of-pocket costs, who pays for it?
So the out-of-pocket costs up in Mount Vernon are zero. We take 45 minutes a week for 10 weeks out of the student's time. And as I said, we use that during guidance time. The town of Mount Vernon actually got a grant a few years ago for $4,000 from 3M, which is the parent company of Velcro, to support our DARE program. We also get supported by the New Hampshire State Police, who has a very intricate support system for DARE, where we don't have to buy any of the classroom materials. We get them directly from the state. Every year we register with the state police. I tell them how many students I'm going to have. I get all the materials I will need for class at no cost to the taxpayers in Mount Vernon. Amherst is the same way. They support the whole program throughout the state. We do have a culmination ceremony at the end of the 10-week program. That's completely covered by donations and stuff. We do not ask any money from the school district or from the town at all.
So same thing for Amherst. We do the same process for the workbooks. For the graduation, what we do is we buy t-shirts for the students. So we get sizes. I don't have my exact number for last year. I believe it was 172 shirts. That was all based off of donation. So the total cost for the graduation, snacks, and the shirts come from donations from the public. We do the Masons Club over in Milford. They do a waffle breakfast every January. All the proceeds from that breakfast go right to the Amherst DARE program. So really our total cost out of pocket for the department or for the schools is just time, pretty much. And we've used Walmart in the past. Pre-COVID, they were awesome. Last year there was some snags, but they came around. From my understanding, what they have is they have community relief money, where essentially if there's some sort of community event going on, they have money that corporate basically encourages them to use. So in the past, we've gone to them and said, hey, you know, we're having a DARE graduation. Will you donate, cake, cookies, things like that? They pretty much tell us, hey, make a list, submit it to the manager. They sign off on it. And, we go in there and get what we need.
Great.
So the short version was free.
Complimentary.
Yeah.
And I do see something on the email we got from the SAU board. The amount of time we spend, the fifth grade program is a 10-week program, it's 45 minutes a week. That's that. It doesn't take an hour and a half. And like I said, Amherst rotates through which class they're using the time from. We use guidance time. And I also see that there was some question if are students able to opt out? The answer is yes. We send home a permission slip prior to starting that's signed by myself, the teacher, the student, and the student's parent. And I was speaking to one of my teachers 2 weeks ago before I had school vacation. We can't recall of one instance in the last 15 years that I've been doing it that we've had a holdout student. We have one on the fence right now, but after the guidance counselor spoke with the parents, that's the student's choice right now. But they spoke with the student about why, and then they talked her in, and she thought the program was something that it wasn't, which I think a lot of parents seem to. I'm 42 years old. Dare to Me was a drug program when I took it back in 1980 something. And I think a lot of parents think that, where it's clearly not a drug program. It's more of a, let's make healthy choices. Let's learn how to communicate. Let's learn how to resist peer pressure, because that's tough for them.
I think you hit the nail right on the head, Sergeant. I mean, a lot of people do perceive this as being a drug program, and it's evolved since that, right? So the 1980s in Los Angeles, where it started to where it is today, it's a completely different program. It focuses on a whole different set of skills that are geared towards youngsters. What type of education do you provide towards families as a child moves into the DARE program in their proper grade? Do you send out advance notices to families? Do you do parent family meetings? How is that sort of conveyed?
So the permission slip, so to speak, we sent was more than a permission slip. It kind of explains what's going to happen over the next 10 weeks. It's got my contact information on it, and I've invited every single parent of every single DARE student to contact me with questions. And it gets sent home with the student through their teacher, and however the school usually sends home slips. And in 15 years, since 2008, I have not received one phone call from one parent with questions, nor, like I said, have I had any parent withhold their student from class.
Thank you. Sir, you wanted to say something?
I can, I've taught DARE all over the state. Part of my job at state police is on the Northern New England training facilitator for Northern New England DARE training team. So we train every officer in New England that wants to be DARE certified here in New Hampshire. For New Hampshire officers, it's free. That 2-week training is very comprehensive. It's free. But I was talking with Sergeant Dano the other day, and we were talking about the parent letter. And when I was, again, I taught for many years all over the state, and the only time I had a parent call me and request that their daughter not partake in the class, I was teaching in Farnstead. And we sent home the parent letters, and I got a phone call from one of the parents. And said it was a woman who said, no, my daughter's not gonna take the class. I said, okay, that's fine. I said, can I just ask why? Her response to me was, well, my husband doesn't think it's a good idea that she's gonna partake in the class, so she can just do something else during that block of time. So DARE was supposed to start, I think, 2 weeks from that point. Shortly before it was, I was gonna go in to teach, which was a couple of days before that. I got a phone call from the lady, and she said that she insisted now that her daughter take the DARE program. Her husband, over the years, had struggled tremendously with chemical dependence, and she did not want her daughter to turn out with the hardships that her husband was having. So that, to me, was kind of worth it. So she was a great student. She won the DARE essay that year, and I don't know how she's doing now, but it was a great conversation between me and the mom.
Great, sir. If I can stick with you for a moment, can you talk a little bit about the difference between the DARE program and maybe another program like the LEAD program, and how they differ, and the LEADS program?
The LEAD program?
Yep.
So so in 2018, I did quite a bit of comparison between the two, because I actually was in a position, I've been in charge of the Northern New England training team since 2017. And in about 2018, my boss, Colonel of the State Police, came to me and said, hey, we are thinking about moving in a different direction to LEAD. So I want to know what your input is. So we met, actually had a meeting with LEAD, and I'm certainly not here in any way, shape, or form to slam LEAD. I wouldn't do that. Any prevention program in the classroom that we can get through the kids is great. I will say, we met with LEAD, we met with the CEO of LEAD. There is a significant cost to training officers. There is a significant cost for the materials for the kids in the classroom. Whereas we now, Sergeant Dano can say, they have 172 kids, we need 172 workbooks, so we provide them with cost. But in 2018, and again, I haven't touched it since then, and I'll tell you why in just a few minutes. The cost for a training kit for 50 students was about $130. So if you've got three classrooms, you could be upwards to 300 plus per session. So we, as the state police, would not provide that. So I don't know how that would pass along, whether the agency would have to, get funds to do that, and the school board would approve that. I know out of that meeting spawned me asking the colonel, listen, we've heard from the, can we bring some people up from there? We brought in the regional director from Dare America, who's Mark Medford. I have a tremendous relationship with him. He lives in Virginia, but his family owns Sanford Village. Probably heard about that. So he's here all the time. So there isn't a time that I can recall over the last 6 years that I've called him, but he's not answered the call anytime. He flew in with the vice president, and we had an hour meeting with the colonel, one of the captains in charge of special services, and Dare. And at the end of that meeting, the colonel turned around to me and said, all I needed to make up my mind, we're going to stay with Dare. The infrastructure is there, the support is there, the training, in my opinion, because I'm a little biased with it because I run the training, but it's an 80-hour block instruction for each Dare officer coming in. Police officers are police officers, they're not teachers. So that part of that 2-week, 80-hour, which you can quote the test, is probably more like 100 hours. We send you home with like 3 hours of homework and that. But we actually have a retired teacher on staff, he's a principal out of New Hampshire here, and he was Dare Educator of the Year in 2016. He spends the whole 2 weeks with us, incorporating these lessons into classrooms. So you are taking a police officer, and now you are taking vital skills that teachers would use, and showing these officers how to relate in a teaching capacity to these children. So I know that in 2018, and I believe still to this day, that the LEAD program is 140-hour component, which in my opinion, after training hundreds of officers through the DARE program, everybody learns in different ways, right? I don't think that's enough to take a police officer and say, here you go, 40 weeks, you're in the classroom, now you're going to do this program. I do know that if you're a DARE officer, LEAD will waive that and give you a 1-day classroom tutorial. And after that 1-day classroom tutorial, you are now going to be a LEAD instructor. I've sat through 3 LEAD classes myself in Northern New Hampshire at the request of the colonel at one point, and then I took it upon myself to attend and see what LEAD had to offer. Again, I'm not here to say that you don't do a good job, because that's not my stance of this. However, after teaching there for a number of years all over the state, I can say that 20 minutes into that block instruction, I could have closed the book, taught the rest of that lesson. Now, I don't know whether that's because I've been teaching there for so long, or because the material was so familiar to me. When I got at the second class, I actually did close the book, and the instructor came up to me after and said, what do you think? I said, I think it's DARE rebranded. So I essentially could have taught that whole lesson. And they weren't happy with what I said, but I do believe that's true.
Thank you.
Again, I'm not here to say that it's not a good program. It's not my stance. I think, my opinion, there is much more confidence.
Thank you. Any more questions? School Leadership Member.
So it's a little bit more of a comment, because I'm on the Sauhegan board, and as I understand it right now, you aren't doing stuff with the high school. So at the end of the day, it's probably not going to be my vote on what happens here. But I do want to say both my children went through the DARE program, as I think probably many people here did. And it was, back then it was Officer Knox. It was their first kind of introduction for both of them to the idea of a school resource officer, who they could go to, who they could talk to, who they could forge a relationship with. And I saw that carry over for years. I mean, I know it might've been something silly that they were pissed off, but they were going to go tell him about it. Like when a bus driver yelled at one of them for passing on her bike. I think he told her she was supposed to stop. Or it might have been like at Halloween one year when I couldn't find them and they didn't have a cell phone. So they stopped one of the police who were down there that they might not have thought to have done, but for those programs. So I just want to say that my experience has been nothing but positive. I appreciate what you all do. I appreciate the board as a whole looking at, how to balance what are the best things moving forward. But I do think there needs to be something in place that allows those relationships and that trust to happen. And I think particularly when you look at, you all cover a lot of things. We've got teen suicides. We've heard about mental health problems that are increasing. And I think in addition to obviously the traditional bases, those issues go a lot with, knowing where to find resources, how to reach out and things like that. And I think that's critically important right now.
Great, thank you, sir.
Also, if I can just add, you brought up a good point with the teen suicide. So, again, going back to 2018, when I did quite a bit of research on lead, DARE has enhancement lessons as well. Bullying, cyberbullying, prescription medication, over the counter. One of the newer ones that they came out with is teen suicide component, which is an actual lesson. So back in 2018, when Lee first started to come into New Hampshire, they had the core lessons and there weren't any enhancement lessons. Again, I don't know if that's still accurate today, but it was then. So there is constantly evolving with obviously more lessons and more enhancement lessons that you can bring forward if the school requests or if the teacher requests.
Thank you. Any more questions? Mr. Vay.
Thank you guys for being here. Just wondering, what value does it provide? Does the DARE program and the training and the interaction, what value does that provide to you as police officers? Does it change the way, has it impacted the way you do your job? Has it impacted the way you approach people? And what value has it been in your profession?
So to answer your question, I'm actually a product of Amherst DARE. So I actually went to the Amherst school system. So I graduated Sauhegan in 2010. So when I was in 5th grade, I received DARE from the Amherst Police Department, and here I am a long time ago. But kind of experiencing that as a student, now experiencing it as an instructor, but now experiencing it as a school resource officer. I don't think I would be a school resource officer if it wasn't for DARE, because it breaks that, sheet of ice that's up with some students. And the second, my introductory kind of lesson is I show them a picture of the outside of the middle school and say, where did I go to school? And they all hoot and holler because they're like, wow, you went through this. And for me to find that common ground with them, the students that unfortunately maybe the rowdy or whatever, it's like a change of personality for a lot of them outside of the classroom and in. And, I think because of DARE, it's just one more thing to have that, like I said, that common ground. I can break bread with them over, hey, look, I say it all the time, and it's like I'm a broken record, but I say, hey, I was in that seat. I was being spoken to by the officer or the teacher. I understand what you're going through. Maybe not exactly, but this is a part of growing up, and eventually you're going to get to this point, and it's been invaluable.
Thank you.
If I may add to her comments earlier about forging relationships, when I go into the village school in Mount Vernon, if I bump into students in the hallway that are grades K through 4, they kind of stare at me like, what is that walking down the hall? Try to wave to them, try to talk to them. They stare at me like I've got 6 heads and I'm a scary figure. Once they hit DARE and I go back and they're in 6th grade, they are running down the hall to talk to me, to say hi, to tell me about their day, tell me about what they did. And that carries over into town functions. We have a spring gala in May. We have Lamson Farm Day in September. And everyone I've had in DARE or currently do, they will run up to me and chit chat with me and do that all day long. The younger ones, they haven't been adapted to that yet. They don't. And when I started there, I was childless. So I used Dare to learn how to interact with students that weren't mine. And I,
Those are good times, right?
and that's how I learned how that changes how I deal with them out on the out in the street. After dealing with 11-year-olds for the last 15 years, I completely indifferent when I bump into them out on the road.
I'm not a dare instructor, but I can tell you that having seen 3 different officers, now Officer Knox was, he's the outlier because he was a dinosaur when I came in, he was a dinosaur when I left. So I never got to see what he was like as a rookie, but I can tell you that having seen 3 people go through that training, the level of confidence that they develop, and those are transferable skills to the road because, you know, they got to think on their feet. And the one thing that resounding every time somebody would come back from these trainings, it gives them an appreciation for what teachers do every day, because trying to, you know, we can go into call it a hot scene where people are out of control. And we know how to handle adults, but most police officers don't know how to handle a group of kids. Like, it's anarchy, and there is definitely, and I've always looked at that and I said, wow, that is amazing when I can see a teacher walk into a room and just gain the trust, respect, and those kids are listening, because I don't know what they do, I don't know what's in the water, but it works. And to see how, and I say this, I'm trying not to embarrass them, but to see how Officer Sarah and specifically Officer Gasek, who he had taken the program over for, both were younger officers, and to see them and to see them evolve through the program, number one, and then when they're not in the school, they're back on the roadway, and then to see how their being has changed while dealing with people, they are calmer. They use just a little bit more patience, because that's what they're doing when they're within the school. And very recently, I got feedback from an officer that went to a call with Officer Sarah, and it was somebody who was it was a person in crisis, and was commending him on how he talked to the person. Like, well, he's talking to juveniles all day long. If you have any idea how stressful that is to bring these people down. So I wish I could have more people go through that type of training, because I think it's invaluable. So confidence is a huge, huge piece, and that is definitely something that transfers out into the roadway. So everybody has a shelf life on, you know, being in the school or being in the DARE position. But when we select people to go into that, it's always people that have the right mindset to begin with. But these are people that we're honing skills on to get them out into the community and to make those relationships, which is really important to us. So that was a great question, by the way, because I think that is paramount.
And some, and just to piggyback on that, some of the best air officers out there in day one in the training. I remember there was an officer from Dover PD came through in 2019. SWAT guy. Chief said, "You're going to DARE school." He shows up day one. Yeah, I'm here at DARE school. Day 10 comes up to me and says, "It's the best training I've ever been through. I should have done it 5 years ago. I had the wrong attitude day one." Absolutely love it. He's now been promoted sergeant, but I mean, I could just tell you stories all around the state, and from teaching there in Southampton myself, sitting at home, 2010, just finished up with the DARE program in Southampton. It's 7 o'clock on a Saturday night, snowing out. Dispatch calls, says, "Hey, trooper, we have a mom on the phone from a little girl who went to Southampton from the sophomore." Absolutely. So I talked to her, watching TV, hit pause. Goes, "Hey, trooper, Paul, listen, can my daughter May's DARE officer, all she talks about is DARE, and her birthday's tonight, bowling alley in Johnstown, maybe? What's my God? Can you come?" So I actually do that plan, but I couldn't go that night. I said, "Well, here's what I'll do. I'll come by Monday morning. I'll go to the middle school, which is now 10." So he said, "Really?" I said, "Absolutely." So I was going to keep my promise. If you're there, officer, right? Even if you say you're going to do something, you have to do it. So I show up Monday morning, walk into the school, walk into the gym, and all the kids that went to that, that's not been something, but you know what, it was, we lost it. So they all go to a different middle school. So I walk in, there must have been 15 kids just walked right over me, high fives, hugging me, just like you said, hey, guess what I did last weekend? Guess what? And it was such a connection. And I mean, every day officer in the state can tell you stories. Tons of it.
Thank you. Very informative comment, Mr. Eckhoff.
Good. Thank you for what you do. Just real quick, I'm sat here when you were talking about the acronym DARE, and maybe it's outdated and doesn't really reflect what you folks are doing. So sounds like you've got a connection with one of the big wigs in Virginia. You know, perhaps, but perhaps it's time to initiate and look at what is the right acronym, what is the right name, title, whatever, that's going to image out properly for not only the kids, but for adults and everything. It may be time for a change. I don't know.
Great, thank you. Ms. Parisi.
So I know on our board notes, we have a requested board action. And I think before so the requested board action is to charge the interim superintendent-elect with forming a committee to evaluate the DARE program and present findings to the SAU board in April of 2024, like a year from now. And I guess I can make that motion and then we can have discussion about it afterward. Is that what you'd like?
Yeah, so I got a thought in terms of before you make that motion, I would hope that you'd add that we include members of our law enforcement community in that subcommittee. So it's not something done in isolation.
Yeah, absolutely. That would
Both representing the town of Mount Vernon and the town of Amherst.
absolutely.
Perfect.
Yep.
Cool. Any more discussion on this particular item before we move to a motion? Ms. Parisi.
Yep. So that's going to be my motion.
Great. Just want to read that back.
Exactly what
for
I
our-
said.
our
Denise
minutes.
got me back there. I'm sure she's got me. She's nodding her head.
Yes.
Okay. So that is my motion. And then once there's a second, I have a little more conversation.
I'll second it.
Okay, thanks. So I think this is a great idea. I think we need to make sure that it's a joint conversation. As always, I think we need to talk about how we're getting this involved, how we're getting more students involved. I think one time in fifth grade isn't really hitting all of the same topics. We know that our middle school is split right now into lower grades and upper grades. And I'm sure there are things in the DARE program that can help everybody at different levels. So I'd like to see us use it in a more widely capacity.
Great. Mr. Goffey.
My concern, and this is part of an ongoing conversation we'll have tonight, and we've had already in the past, and I think Steve's going to touch upon it as well, but removing this from the normal core instruction time, I think that with the lack of instruction time that we have currently, as few as 160 full days of school in a given year for students with snow days and late start days, to have this as, not that I don't value the program, but to have this taking the place of math or science or reading, I don't think that can happen. I think it needs to be moved into taking out, 2 sessions of art, 2 sessions of music, something along those lines to make this less impactful in core instruction time.
Thank you. Any other comments? So again, the motion on the floor is to actually have our superintendent go ahead and create a study committee to report back in April in terms of any modifications or changes that should be instituted or continued with inside the current program to come back with recommendations to this board for discussion in April.
You said April, but the suggested action said April of 24. Do we mean April of 23? 24 would seem to be a long way away,
It definitely is. Let me see here.
unless I misread it.
Is there a purpose to say?
No,
that?
it was trying to actually do an evaluation of an entire year, pre-test, post-test. And so it's trying to get some real data and some recommendations. So it doesn't, as long as we get through a full cycle with students, so we could do it by January.
Well, then that's fine if you want to go on the full year, but I think the educational aspect of it needs to be addressed sooner than April of 24. That if there's a way to try to find a way to shoehorn it in somewhere else, I think that would be beneficial before the start of next year.
Yeah, we can certainly do that as the low hanging fruit by the end of the spring and then evaluate.
Even if it's over the summer, that's fine. But you know, as
Thank
long
you.
as they're all on board with it as well.
So just, Mr. Conklin, before I get to you, I just want to clarify your concern. in the town of Mount Vernon, it's being done with inside the guidance structure.
Correct, but it's not being done that way in Amherst. They're taking, what is it, 10 hours? I know it's only 10 hours, but it's 10 hours for this, it's 10 hours for an assembly, it's 10 hours for this, it's 5 hours for this. All of a sudden, you're looking at 160 days. But how many of those hours are actually spent in math and reading or science?
And so your concern is that, or actually your request is that the study committee review that, to determine if that's the most effective course, and then report back to this board in April of next year.
No, my recommendation is if DARE is evaluate DARE as a whole over the next year. To me, where you do it during the day doesn't matter, but I don't think it can be during core instruction time. I think it needs to be moved into, again, one of those other subjects that, what we call the specials, if you will.
Perfect. Is that clear?
Yes, you got it. I'm on.
Okay, great. Mr. Conklin, I'm sorry. Right. Any other conversation? And just make sure that Ms. Beam doesn't have her hand up. Great. Nope, we're good. All right, let's go ahead and call the vote. I'm sorry, Ms. Peters. Sure.
Not my board, but why are we not in the 7th grade?
What was the question? I couldn't hear the
Why,
question.
why is the DARE program stop in the 7th grade and not continue on?
No, it's not happening right now, right?
Oh, and Amherst, I apologize.
Yeah.
So with the health teacher for the middle school, there's a long-term sub now. So I'm not really at a point where
Personnel.
right, exactly. So that's where it's kind of been up in the air. The previous health teacher and I had discussion about expanding it 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th. And it would basically be a hybrid. It wouldn't be a 10-week thing, but if the teacher was talking about, I believe she was talking with students about like healthy eating choices and healthy body image. I could come in and I could talk about certain things that were in the DARE book that I could kind of have a leg to stand on and not just going off on a whim and being like, hey, this is why I can go with curriculum based information from DARE and kind of impart that to them. The big thing, and it was always was vaping, because kids aren't smoking cigarettes anymore. It's now vapes. And so we were planning on having that, and there's a whole enhanced lesson on just middle school vaping. So it's not high school, it's middle school specific. But yeah, so it's only 5th grade right now because, I can't talk to it's not my place to go to a long-term sub and be like, hey, I'm taking your time. So.
Great. Thank you. Let's go ahead and call the vote, starting off with Mr. Torres down on the end.
Torres, yes.
Glover abstain.
Bayou, yes.
Peters, yes.
Friend, yes.
Yes.
Galay Zimmerman, yes.
Keefe, yes.
Conklin, yes.
Reese, yes.
White, yes.
Lawrence, yes.
Gothier, yes.
Ms. Beam?
Beam, yes, and thank you.
Great. That motion passes. Thank you, gentlemen, for taking your time out of your day to visit with us.
Thank you.
Thank you for the work that you guys do on a daily basis. Moving on in our agenda, let's move on to our superintendent, Mr. Chamberlain.
Sure, and I submitted this on prior to the week. Happy to answer any questions. Just I hope I have communicated with this board and the administration. The teachers have been incredibly grateful for this opportunity to be your interim. People ask, am I excited about the next person? I am, of course, but really privileged and humbled. And I love to learn, and every day I learn and work with great people. But I appreciate Tom's notice. It's been an interesting in budget season. It's been an interesting year. A couple of things that are new to me, even last year, was the use of unWE data at the board level, and has been embraced by certain aspects of our community. That is high stakes, and we're looking at it, and I get that. But the comparison of districts has been a huge part of our work. And one of the things that I don't think is comparable right now with other districts is instructional time. And it dovetails in everything. And I get it. And it took me a long time to get my arms around the notion of what instructional time looks like. Like, do you have 5 days built in? Like, what are you talking about? Do we make up snow days? What are you talking about? So I wrote about it all over the place, a little bit on the late starts, school start time, a little bit of this. So it's probably way too disorganized. But There was a decision made to move to hours based as opposed to days based. And that decision created a school day long enough that you could satisfy the state requirement in 170 days. So that lengthened the day. So, so the days were long, but they weren't super long. Like the 170-day hours calendar that exists in this district is still shorter than 178 full days that I worked with for 22 years in another district. So that's why I had a tough time grasping this, because it wasn't like there was an hour extra a day. It was actually shorter than people that have 180 days. And I think I've been pretty consistent in a lot of conversations. I love school. I think what happens in SAU 39 is the greatest thing in the world. We care about kids, we feed kids, we support kids, we teach kids, kids learn, and I love school. And I want school to be a place where they are engaged and exciting and have all these wonderful opportunities. To me, more school is better. I really love school. I really want school to be that place. And when we talk about, as Tom just said, it's conceivable that this year we're gonna have 160 full days of school. And yes, late starts and delayed openings, but they do change the schedule. When we change the schedule, it changes the day. It's just kids. So as we work through collective bargaining agreements and policies and practices in start time, it's just as funky when when I was driving around thinking about this, that we actually lengthened the school day to get to 170 days, and we changed the school start time, which actually put more pressure on the longer school day. I'd be much happier with the school start time if we were 180 days. You with me? Because the hours of the days would be less, so the impact of dismissals would be less. So we actually made a decision, go to 170 days. That makes it harder to have research-based, evidence-based start time based on sleep data. You with me? It's a little funky in my little life when I'm driving around here. And to me, it is a learning equation. High quality instruction plus really good curriculum, you achieve standing. And you need time. And I love, and this is where I really thought when I came here and I talked to teachers and I valued what they did and praised what they did and appreciated what they did, that it would be, yay. And so, because I love, and Christine and I talked this morning, one of the things that moved to this seat from that seat or that seat, last year I was in classrooms a lot. And I love being in classrooms. I love seeing the magic that happens in classrooms and trying to help use evidence research-based practice, I say all the time. So I just believe in instructional time. I believe in high quality instruction. With more time, you achieve more standards. Something for all of us to embrace, all of us to grasp as we start moving forward, because it's higher stakes, everybody, because we're being compared to districts with as much as 15 more instructional days. You do that by 10 years, that's 150 days. That's close to a whole year of education, everybody. And I'm getting smacked a little bit. Sometimes I do, like, why aren't we, and I like tailwinds, I don't like headwinds. And instructional time right now is a headwind for me. Because I do value and see what good things happen in classrooms. And to me, the more, the better. Anyway, so that was my little preamble to the instructional time. And I've been off with this and I apologize, but it's just what's going on. Talk a little bit about math. We are going to start connecting with 6/8 and 9/12 stuff. That's happening. Thank you to everybody. I'm looking forward to the ALICE training tomorrow. There's going to be a survey out next week about, does the community like having time at the end of the day or in the morning? You with me? The late start PD versus early release PD, because now we've got a little sample size. That's going to happen. The website is a work. It is a work in progress. It is a priority. March 14th is a pretty big day for us over in the SAU office. There'll be a little bit of time, I hope. But I do want you to know it doesn't meet our expectations. The community member was right. It's not as user-friendly. We found some good models. We've got some resources going. So I do see that happening. And I also had just noticed I really like working with our SEC. So anyway, that's my little report. Awesome. Thank you. Ms. Glazer.
Can I ask a quick question about the snow day issue?
Yep.
So at the end of the academic calendar right now, there's like 5 days that are listed as days for snow days.
Yes.
Is it a 1-for-1? Basically, we have a snow day, we're going to one of those, right?
Yes.
Okay.
So Hegan High School cannot meet the required hours of instruction without making up those snow days. That's easy. That's not necessarily true in other districts.
But shouldn't we be making up those days across the board?
I think I've made that pretty clear.
Yeah.
Yes. I love time. I love it.
Right.
However, there are some structures in place that I don't have influence of as your interim superintendent.
Okay,
And there were collective bargaining agreements and blah, 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 blah. So it's not as easy as waving a magic wand.
okay. I
Um,
wonder, because the question came up again on Facebook the other day. Someone said, and and someone replied and said, no, snow days are built in. And I'm like, well, not really, because they're at the end.
So-
So when does that decision get made on whether or not we're gonna keep going or?
So it's
I
on the
think they all
agenda for the Mount Vernon board to talk about it tomorrow. The Amherst board will talk about it as well.
And
So-
so Hegan automatically.
So again, has to, and what it means by built in is at the elementary level, you need 145 hours of instruction to meet the state requirement. It's a minimum, by the way, that's a minimum. And at Sauhegan, you need 190. One thing we know that, so you could say that because in Amherst and Mount Vernon, there's enough hours at 170 days, you don't have to make them up. You don't have to make them up to meet the state requirement. Sauhegan, however, at 175 days, it's close, by the way. It's too close for my credential, that's all right. So Sauhegan doesn't meet the requirement, so we have to make them up.
I'm a little concerned overall, and I'll just throw this out to the whole board with what seems to have been a race to, at some point, what are the minimums we have to do on this? And we're looking at it at the high school, and it's like, for our graduation requirements, we've got the minimum state requirements. And I know Mike's been looking at that this year. That's something he's rehabbing. But from my perspective, we are not doing our job or a service to the students if we're giving them all the bare minimum that we're required to do.
And thank you.
And
for
I
your-
think that's what you're saying
and
too,
thank
but I
you for your
just want to
service.
throw that out there.
I appreciate your service and that piece, but yes, and
Yeah.
we're working through with all the boards and future and instructors and all that. Fun stuff. I've learned an awful lot about instructional time, minute counting, and collective bargaining agreements.
Thank you. Ms. Grunt.
So I also just want to be clear on the instruction time, even though it's 170 days, by the time we take out all the assembly days and everything else, we're really talking. We're losing another 12, 15 days, something.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, I don't want to go any further. That'll be a whole nother discussion, but I just want to keep that in mind. The one question, can you clarify the NHRS
sure.
information?
So, there was years ago, the state laws around retirement changed and what is pensionable, what is not pensionable. And when they changed that, to be completely honest, and there wasn't great guidance from the Hampshire retirement system. So the SAU staff did what they thought was right, and they checked, and this happened all over districts. And eventually the retirement system came in and audited and found that some of our practices, we made things that pensionable that weren't pensionable, and some things weren't pensionable that was pensionable. And so the audit determined all these. And then in working with Amy, Katie, and Kim, the staff, we went through in every single one and talked about how we changed all our practices, aligned them with it, and asked for some appeal on something. It's one of my favorite words in this is de minimis. And so I said de minimis the more times in this memo than I ever have in my career. Because literally, by the time you apply the change, if someone did a 2 hours overtime and we said it was pensionable, that's a de minimis impact. That's not gonna, that is literally, it would cost us more time and resources than the impact of that. So I had to go through every single one. Wow. There's a mouse in my pocket. Kim had to guide me through going every one. I just put my signature to it. But I'm hoping that before Mike gets on board, this gets cleaned up and we're in great shape. Our practices are, it's just, they had to, every citation, we had to say what we did.
Gotcha. Okay, thank
But it
you.
was interesting. I learned a lot.
Thank you.
And de minimis.
Thank you. Any other questions? Mr. Glover.
Steve Chamberlain, notwithstanding the challenges by collective bargaining agreements and other things, budgets, what is, in your opinion, might be an ideal solution to turn the instructional time headwind into a tailwind?
Yeah, I look forward to a collaborative relationship with all our constituencies, including community members. I mean, some of this, and going back to the history, I want to make sure the community values this instructional time like I do. And they understand why we're getting out a little later and why we're using these days. Because going back, There was some history where the community, I think, was interested in an early exit in the summer. So I think we have to do a good job there. But I would love 175 full days. I'd love 100, I'd love a lot, but I'd settle for 175 full days of instruction, making up all snow days and having as many full days out of the 175 as possible. But I'd go, me, I taught at 182 days. I taught as a math teacher 182 days. And I liked it. I like teaching. And I worked in a school district 178 full days. And so 160 impact, 160 full days have impacted. But I get it, and things have changed. And working with our one of our attorney, this is districts who went to hours-based years ago who thought this was really some real strong benefit. Things change, the cycle changed. Other districts are trying to walk this back too. And the problem is sometimes you codify some of this stuff, not really, because everything, it sounds great. Then a numbskull like me comes in and says, I like time.
Well, we probably wouldn't be having this conversation if we had a better academic achievement in the key metrics that we measure. So is that a fair statement?
I'd always have this conversation because I know I'm always interested in continual improvement, and I will always think instructional time is better. There is no cap on the impact of instructional time. But I think when the comparisons are, it's something that came to me very abruptly when I see a not an equal footing with other districts. But I would always ask for more, always will until I'm out of this business, because what teachers do in classrooms and what we do for kids in schools, I want to be as wonderful and as magnificent.
Thanks, Steve.
Any more questions? Ms. Beam, sorry, make sure to check. Nope, we're good. All right, let's move on to the next item. Ms. Facey with our reserve fund balance brick school conversation.
Okay. Done?
It's on. Want to go testing?
Testing. Good. Okay. All right. Yes. So you should have a memo in your packet regarding this topic. So just for folks who may not be aware, the brick school is actually leased from the Amherst School Board. And the current or the prior lease agreement that was dated 2010 established an account, a special reserve account to fund improvements to the brick school. That lease agreement had a series of projects that were completed. So the new lease agreement came into effect in 2021 and for the FY22 budget. However, the language that talked about that reserve was not included in the new lease agreement. So our auditors are asking for guidance on how to classify the balance of the funds that remain in this special reserve account that was established as part of the prior lease agreement. So currently those funds, or under the old lease agreement, those funds were considered restricted. And so they've been sitting there. So there's about $30,000 that are sitting in that account. As part of the new lease agreement, any funds that are put into the SAU budget and not used are going back to fund balance to offset prior or to offset tax impact going forward. So I'm hoping making sense, but it's a little bit complicated. So the funds that are sitting there for $30,000, they need to be either determined to be assigned or unassigned in order to complete the SAU audit. So in the memo that I sent you all, I included the lease agreement language that speaks to this in the previous lease agreement and also in the current lease agreement. So in considering what to do at this point, I'm recommending that in order to close out the audit, that the board classifies that $30,000 that is sitting there as restricted for the FY22 audit, but then institute the Brick School Improvements Committee that was set up as part of the prior lease agreement. In the, potentially in the same, with the same configuration that was set up, which was one member of the Amherst School Board as the lessor and 3 members from each of the school districts as the lessee. And then assign that Brick School Improvements Committee to recommend revisions to the lease agreement to decide how to classify those funds going forward. And I would also recommend that that committee work with the facilities director and myself to develop sort of a mini capital improvements plan for the Brick School to guide funding and project decisions. So I'll take any questions. Yeah.
So before we entertain any motions,
Yeah,
let's
sure.
open up for questions. Ms. Cooley,
2 quick questions. How long is the lease for?
The current lease?
Yeah, I'm just curious.
I believe it's 10, I can tell you. Yeah, it was set up for FY 22
Okay.
and.
So
I don't see the term, it should be. in here. Go ahead, ask me the next one.
I guess
5 years.
I'm a little confused going forward. Is there $7,500 still being allocated each year for this?
Yep.
So the funds are still there. We still have money for capital improvements.
So
For improvements that are needed at the school. The question is what to categorize them as?
well, no, so right now we have 7,500 that has gone into the budget for, say, last year. And
will go in going
7,200
forward.
of that was spent.
Right.
And the remaining 271 is going to unassigned fund balance, which will offset tax impact future years.
Right.
That's currently what we're doing.
And that's not a capital reserve fund. That's just maintenance plans. It's just a maintenance budget
maintenance,
for a
whatever we
building
need, right.
that's
Yep.
how old?
For what-
150, something like that?
Yeah, 18.
So
But for
so
that
where did
prior money,
that was money that was just accumulated and not
So-
spent on maintenance?
well, so there was.
Not have maintenance that was needed?
Well, no, so there was, I think almost a 300, hold on a second, I have it. So the prior lease had, established a budget for, a series of projects to be done.
It was a whole list of
Two.
things
Yep, so
Peter Warburton had worked on.
yep, so
When-
the windows,
The heat pump systems.
yep.
And were
so
those
it
all
was-
completed?
Yep, so an HVAC system replacement upgrade, some repairing to soffits, brick and mortar work, roof repair, and window replacement. So it was about $300,000, I think, in total repairs, and those were completed.
Okay.
And so there's $30,000 that remain in that fund from that. So that is
Okay.
just sitting there
Okay.
and it was restricted under the old lease agreement, but it's not discussed in the new lease agreement. So the auditors are saying you need to identify this as either restricted or unrestricted.
Okay.
So it's just, there's no designation to those funds. So my recommendation is that you restrict them for now so that we can close out the audit, but then you reestablish the Brick School Improvements Committee and decide, hey, do we have projects that we need to do? Or should we release these funds and have them go back?
Yes.
But I think it's too difficult to do right now when we're trying to close the audit next month. So you're just delaying that process.
And so Amy, if we decide to keep these restricted for now, we can go back in 6 months and say, make them unrestricted and return it to unassigned fund balance, correct? It's not
Yeah.
a permanent decision.
Right. I mean, what I think you'll need to do is do an amendment to the current lease agreement to designate the committee to decide to do that
Yeah, but I think.
or to recommend to the
Yeah,
board.
basically what the auditors are doing is they're taking the default position that these are restricted funds. You never addressed it in the new lease. So in order to sign off on this audit, because we're taking the position as restricted, leave it as restricted and we can sign off. Otherwise, you have to prove why they're not
Right.
unrestricted,
Yeah.
which takes longer.
Right.
So what Amy's suggestion is, well, let's just wrap up the audit, keep it as restricted. We can always determine at a later date
Yep.
what to do with those funds,
Yep.
but by us not keeping them as restricted or going against what they're suggesting, that continues to leave the audit open and just
Correct.
delays things. So we can do whatever we want with it,
Yep.
just leave it as restricted and move
It's
on.
more, it's clerical thing now and we can
For
determine.
Yeah,
longer.
basically that's what
Right
it
now,
is.
we're,
Yeah,
thank
we'd
you.
like to close the SAU audit.
right, right.
But you also, I think, as a board, you need to decide what to do with that $30,000.
And I guess I'm still having a little trouble wrapping my head around this a little bit.
That's
So when we looked at the budgets for next year,
Mhm.
and we looked at maintenance and improvements and things like that were needed at the brick school. And we budgeted, I think, $7,500.
Yep.
Was that $7,500 plus the 30? Like, was that factored in or was it
30 is
just
just sitting there.
gone? Okay.
Yeah, the 30 is.
It's as if it was a capital reserve fund without it being a capital reserve. fund.
Exactly.
It just has been
Yep.
in a
Okay.
bucket that has been undefined since the original lease agreement was signed in 2010.
And so
Well,
really,
it
this
was
is money.
defined in the original lease agreement. It wasn't defined in the
In the renewal.
lease agreement. Yeah.
But I think we did that on purpose because we had taken all the capital items out of there. The big, major expenses were taken care of.
Yep.
Now, I say that, I can't say that, returning, that's a wise thing. And out of the other side of my mouth saying that we need to put 600,000 in our Clark Wilkins capital reserve. But I think you're looking at, what we do with this later, keeping this somewhat in a savings account because 30,000 is probably an appropriate an amount to have for a house because that's essentially what this is. It's not much different. It's similar systems, a little bigger than that.
Yep.
Maybe not as big as some houses in town here, but
Yep.
I think having that for a roof, you could easily do a roof for 30 grand on that building, I would presume.
Yeah, and I would
Absolutely.
suggest that the improvements committee
Yeah.
wrestle through that and come back to the SAU board with a recommendation.
Makes sense. Ms. Beam's got a question. Ms. Beam.
Yeah, so I guess my question is, do you just need a motion right now for us to go ahead and keep it reserved for now? And then is it a separate motion to reform this committee?
So in an effort to keep things simple for our minute taker, unless someone objects, we can make a motion that includes 1, 2, and 3 on the list.
Fine with me.
I'll make that motion.
Great. Mr. Gothier makes a motion as recommended in the statement, classify the brick school improvements account balance as restricted for the fiscal year 22 audit. Number 2, establish the brick school improvements committee with 1 member of the leaseor Amherst School Board and 3 members, 1 from each school district as the leasee SAU board. And number 3, assign the brick school improvements committee to recommend revisions to the current brick school lease agreement, including but not limited to language that defines how the brick school improvement funds are to be classified going forward and provide guidance on the oversight and authorization of expenditures from the brick school improvement account. I'll second that. Discussion. Ms. Glazer. There's one.
It's a tiny little thing, but can we call it the brick school maintenance and improvements
That's fine with me.
group?
You can call it whatever you want.
Improvements to me sounds like, okay, what can we spend this on to make this place better?
Yeah.
And I'm not opposed to that. I'm not saying that, but things like a roof, for example, are, kind of essential maintenance terms. And I think it's important that the committee be looking at what long-term maintenance is needed in addition to, is there something that needs to be improved upon?
Yeah.
I am concerned though that this wasn't picked because we haven't, because this is a $30,000 contribution every year of that last lease, which expired 2 years ago. So I'm concerned that auditors didn't pick this up in the the FY 21 audit.
Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah.
So,
They may have seen it, but they probably passed on it.
Yeah.
That's probably what they did, because they usually set a threshold. And if it falls below the threshold, if they have time to look at it, they'll look at it. If not, they'll just.
and this is one of the benefits to rotating auditors. So we have new auditors this
Yeah.
year with fresh eyes. So I think it's important to have that.
Yeah, they're asking
cycle.
all the questions because they're unfamiliar.
Yep. It was
Probably what happened.
it was a very good process with the auditors this
Yeah.
year, I'll say. So
How long are they on this engagement? Was it 3 years?
they're 3 years.
Three.
Yep. This is year 1.
Any other questions, discussion? Okay, let's go ahead and call the vote, starting with Mr. Torres.
Georges,
Glover, yes.
Yes.
Peters, yes. Friend, yes.
Yes.
Blaise Zimmerman, yes.
Keith, yes.
Conklin, yes.
Parisi, yes.
White, yes.
Lawrence, yes.
Gothier, yes.
Yes, ma'am.
Beam, yes.
Great, that motion carries.
Thank you.
Let's move on to our public input 2 of 3. This is the special public input that was put in specifically towards our school start time discussion. If any members of the public here in person would like to address the board about this particular topic, or online, go ahead and use the raise your hand feature. Or members of the public, just come up to the microphone here.
Wendy Dupuy, Amherst.
Thank you.
I just have something to hand out.
Sure.
I don't know if there's enough, but it takes on impact. It's just an article from Stanford Medicine and it's stapled backwards, so read it with the staple on the right. I wanted to support what Julie was saying earlier. According to the National Sleep Foundation, sleep deprivation for teenagers is an epidemic right now. The data shows, and my kids are living examples of this, that teenagers don't sleep well before like 11 o'clock. They just don't sleep deeply, no matter how good their sleep habits are. They can get themselves to fall asleep a little earlier, but it's not a deep sleep. They're sleeping deeply when their alarm goes off at 5:30 in the morning, which would be the case for a lot of them if we go back to the earlier start time. And some of them have to get buses at 6 a.m. According to the research, teens need about 9 hours of sleep a night. So if they're getting up at 5:30, they have to fall asleep at like 8:30 at night, even 9:30, if they're getting 8 hours of sleep. It's just not enough and it's not feasible. They're not going to be able to do that. So my daughter is a sophomore. She falls asleep around 11, which I guess is not that unusual based on what I've been reading today when I heard you were going to have this vote today. And when she was in 8th grade, that was 2 years ago, and they had the option to be remote or to come back and be in person. She chose remote to stay remote because she could get another 30 minutes of sleep. Because this was when we had the old earlier start times. And just the thought of getting up earlier and getting to school at that stage in her development and her life just wasn't feasible for her. So that's how important it was to her. She and I fear that if we go back to the earlier start time, she's going to be chronically sleep deprived. She'll be tired all the time. And she's not the only one, according to the research I've been reading about. It's hard to thrive in the classroom. It's hard to thrive in sports. She's a runner, and it's hard to do that sport when you're sleep deprived. She can always make up missed class if they have to leave early to go to a meet and they missed that last class of the day. She can make that up. She can find out what she missed, but she can't perform in that class or perform at the meet if she is exhausted. So I hope that you will listen to the science and the data and keep the times the way they are now. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other members of the public in person here or online that want to address the board about this particular topic? Seeing none in person and none online, let's go ahead and start our school start time discussion. Mr. Chair.
Sure. So it's actually in the last year, we took this up in May. And it was decided then that it was too late to make any substantive changes just because the parents, right, and changed everything. So at that time, we said do as much surveying as you can in the fall and put it on the calendar in February, and that's where we are today. So you've got hopefully enough data that you feel you have a good understanding of how people feel. We've got surveys of kids and adults, faculty, staff, families. We've got athletic dismissal. We even went into like orthodontic dismissals. I gave you stuff comparisons from the middle school. So hopefully there's enough data there. Leadership team, we've talked about this really since the 20 months that I've been here. And I put in my just a cover memo to this discussion that for years I was skeptical of the impact, but I'm not. I do believe in the research. I do believe in the evidence. The question here is, under the circumstances now, just to be fully transparent, there is structural impacts on the current start time on our instructional at both elementary and secondary. So specifically, as I wrote about, and I talked with Kathleen, school drop off right now, if we actually measured, we probably are beginning instruction at 7:55, where it's posted 7:45. So we lose, and that's different than the 8:30 time. And what Kathleen supposes is that whether it's COVID and all the remnants of that, but there are more families dropping off now, which slows the drop off. Right? I drive by sometimes at 7:47, and there's still a lot of people coming in. So because of the start time at early elementary, there is a structural change in instructional time there. Secondary at Sauhegan, there is a change in, by going to 3 o'clock, we have reduced instructional time at the secondary level. And I guess, in one of the things that we get at the SAU office, we get to just talk, dream, and impact. One of the things, as you process all that, is 8:30 in stone. The research talks about 8 o'clock. Some schools, so there's about 4 districts in New Hampshire that have taken this on. And they range from 8 o'clock start time, which is considered late time for secondary, and 8:15 start time and 8:30 start time. And so those are considered in the world of start time in New Hampshire as late starts. You know, as I put in the memo, I started, believe it or not, first class 7:11. The bell rang 7:11. And so I had 45 minutes, and then I ran a building that was 8 o'clock, 8 to 2:50, which is my favorite. 8 to 3 as a school day in New Hampshire. I like 8 to 3. I like round numbers. And every minute matters to me. And so, and I do think 8 o'clock is certainly a lot closer than 7:11 or 7:30 like it was before. But there are some things maybe we could do. And one of the things we talk about is scheduling. I've talked about this with Kristen, and I've talked about this with Mike and Dana at Sauhegan. Is it possible to schedule a different type of class at the end of the day? You know, like, and Kristen and I talked about an Eagle block at the end of the day, which is still instructional time, but it's not the continuity of instruction, you know, when you miss continuity. So all those are being explored. Mike and I talked about, and I don't want to be struck by lightning, this is just out there, could advisory be? Like if we move 15 minutes start time to 8:15 and did advisory, then you would gain 45 minutes of instructional time. And so those things so I talked to the bus, I don't think you can move early elementary any more earlier than 7:30, right? At 7:30, that's it. Right, so then it's the gap between 7:30 and 8:30 that you can close. If you can close it to 8:15, you save 15 minutes, you reschedule something for half hour, we gain 45 minutes. How do you save 15 minutes? How do you start school at 8:15? Like I put in the memo, and we costed out we put this as one of the survey questions. If you remember, it actually came one of our little discussions. And it wasn't uniformly loved, right? The single tier K through 12 busing system at 8 o'clock. And I get that. It's a lot of money, and there was the specter of a K. I lived in a K through 12, all in the same buses, and behavior improved the day we went K through 12 on the same bus. And in my time as superintendent of a little district, and 2 bus accidents that I had nothing serious, the older kids were unbelievably caring for the littles. And it worked. But, and I think it could work here, but I understand in that survey question, it wasn't universally loved. Absent of that, we could do the deployment of an increased buses on the second wave. We know that for 15 buses, we can bus all the elementary kids in Amherst, for example, and Mount Vernon, and we can get them there by 7:30. And then how do you close that hour to 8:15? Well, now you do just single tier, add another 5 buses. So you're with me, you're not paying for them twice, you're just paying for them once. And maybe that is of value enough if we costed that out. And if we did some rescheduling, all of a sudden we have abide by the research of sleep, and we have reduced the loss of instruction significantly. But that's, and I don't say this, I guess there's probably a pre-vacation juice worth of squeeze in the memo, but really that, I mean, I didn't mean to be flip. But that's really it. It's research and instructional time. There's also research that says more instructional time, more learning. There's also research that says sleep, more learning. They're fighting in SAU 39 right now. Not hard, but there's a battle between those two concepts right now. And can we shave it and still by the research that still reclaim some instruction? That's where I want to live. I would love, like, one of the things that Christine knows, this really frustrates me. I would love to get all our reading specialists together, K through 12, all the time on those late starts. If we do that, I have 45 minutes of common late start time. Because someone starts at 7:30, someone starts at 8:30, my overlap in the middle is like 45. And 8 to 3, you wouldn't believe all the fun stuff we'd get out of that. But that's real money and it's real cultural change. But if I can squeeze 15, I'd take 15 minutes and a little bit of schedule change, all of a sudden we've won. The conflict is now they're getting along with each other as opposed to. That makes sense. Anyway, it's probably more than they wanted from little old me, but that's what you got.
So I appreciate you starting us off like that. From my perspective, that's what I would love to see. I would love to see us as a whole SAU board, as a community, be able to take the proof that we have, the research and evidence-based practices, put them both in and make it work somehow and come up with a compromise. So I'll just leave it at that.
Have we seen, I know the Amherst test scores have been talked about ad nauseum for the last 2.5 months. Have we seen positive results from this at Souhegan? I mean, has there been a change? You look at the student portion of the survey for Souhegan, you look at the staff portion of the survey for Souhegan, this is not a very popular idea. And there are different incentives there. Kids have sports and stuff, teachers have families that they need to be able to get home. So I totally get it. So and then obviously the family effect, the family response for Souhegan students has been overwhelmingly positive for this. But have we seen results? I mean, we've had 2 years of this, and I don't know what our testing time frame is. If throwing more money at it doesn't seem to be a responsible thing from the leader. So 5 bucks on, so 10 now. At what point are we trying to shoehorn this in to say, yes, it worked. We spent an extra $1.5 million a year to get there, but hey, we did it for a marginal improvement.
I get it. Right now, one of the issues with educational data and research, and there's about 1 billion variables going on right now, right? We changed start time, COVID, we changed, so is there direct evidence there's in discerning what makes your life better and what makes education better through all these surveys, I yield to the board for their wisdom.
And so my point, I voted against this 2 years ago, and it was primarily because we didn't have a plan for buses. We said, oh, we'll figure it out over the summertime. We're going to come up with a plan to make this work, which, okay, that doesn't sound like a plan to me. We're still talking about buses now. And so to me, when I think of this from an Amherst school board perspective, I think, all right, we can put on 15 buses now instead of 17. That's good. That's a savings. We can operate this on 15. We're not going to put, now we're putting start times on the wings of maybe getting more bus drivers. We want to add 5 bus drivers. The reason we have 17 now is because there aren't enough drivers out there. So, we're going to throw another factor on there to put the wins on somebody else in this. So to me, this is still something we're hashing through, and it doesn't work for me. And again, going back to my point earlier, that this is significant. Mike wasn't on shoot. This is significantly less educational time, just in terms of the 25 minutes that you mentioned per day at Souhegan. That's 4,200 minutes, and then Clark Wilkins, our soft start time of 8:55 compared to or 8:45 compared to the hard. 7:45 is the listed start time, and our actual start time is 7:55. That's 1,700 minutes. I mean, that's not insignificant in the course of the day. We go back to 10 days for this, 10 days for this. What is 1,700 minutes? It's 5 or 6 days there probably. So it's frustrating to me that this continues to be a problem that's there's no good solution for, and I don't think anybody wants to spend another $500,000 a year on buses that we can't get drivers for.
Great. Ms. Beam has got a question. Ms. Beam, go ahead.
Yeah, I don't think, as much as I would love to find a compromise, I don't know that realistically we can find more drivers and more buses and more money for buses. I guess my question goes to if we looked at going to days based, like we started, well, not started, but earlier in the meeting, we talked about going from hours based to days based. And if we were able to go to literally more days, does that give us enough that it gives us some give that we can make it work? Because I do think that the things that we hope to see, we have seen. And I wasn't sure that we would, I'll be honest. I was part of I chaired the original committee to look into this. I absolutely was a supporter of trying it. And I think that we have, the surveys that we've done have predominantly said that people either are okay with it or really, really like it. And especially with our older, but then with the younger, we saw some of the benefits that we expected as well. We have more enrichment opportunities. We have opportunity for them to play outside in unstructured time in the afternoon when there's still daylight. We have some really good things, and it doesn't surprise me we have more people driving because they're doing what all the parents did when it was early for the middle and high school, right? They would let them sleep as long as they could, and then they take them and drive them instead of doing the bus. So I think that we've gotten our buses a little more efficient. I think that we can really push for people to use those buses. But I like the ideas of being able to have the slightly less critical things that are harder to make up at the end of the day. I think that that's absolutely something we should have been doing all along. And so would having more days to play with, which I'm not against, because I have to tell you, getting out earlier than everyone else is hard on our young families, especially. It's hard to find childcare when none of the camps are open. When there's if you can't have camp grandma close by, it's very difficult to cover that week or two of no school. And so is that something that would help this? Because I agree with Tom. I don't believe that I don't believe that sacrificing instruction is appropriate, but I'm up for any reasonable option to make sure we don't sacrifice that.
Thank you, Terry. Ms. Grunt.
So I'm all about instruction time. When I, learned that we lost the 20 to 25 minutes every single day of instruction time, I was flabbergasted just for the start time. I just didn't think that was okay. It doesn't help. You hear the feedback from our teachers who can't get through curriculum appropriately. They had to make some major adjustments and changes. It doesn't help any of our AP students. Even adding days to the schedule, which I would accept it as a help, it would be beneficial to add at the beginning of the school year, because those AP teachers and anyone going to that, adding days at the end of the school year doesn't help. So we need to figure out how to lengthen that day and get the instruction time in. I thought it was interesting going through the data. When you look at the families and the students, they all wanted certain start times. If you looked at what the teachers wanted, they're complete opposite, both for Clark Wilkins, AMS, and for Sohegan. The families all wanted 8:30 and the teachers wanted 7:30. Mount Vernon was the only one that was aligned all the way through. The families, the teachers, the kids all wanted 7:30. So it's interesting. And when you look at the teachers, they're talking about readiness to learn. At the end of the day, they're like that AMS in the high school, they said they're not there. So that's not helpful. When I look at the amount of time missed, our fall sports, 60 hours, almost 61 hours, students missed in fall sports. Winter, 33 hours. Spring last year, which will probably be similar this year, 37 hours of instruction at a time. That's not okay. We spoke to our, we heard from our dean of faculty about scheduling and rescheduling certain classes. It doesn't work well because they're trying to meet the majority of students' wants of their classes. So we end up having some of our strongest classes at the end of the day. And when you have kids walking out and missing 60 hours, that's a problem. So I'm about instruction time. We need to fix that, and then I'm okay. And I get the science. I'm 100% behind it, trust me. But we got to put the instruction hours back.
Ms. Zimmerman and then Mr. Collins.
So I was not obviously on the board when when the times changed. I was struck particularly by AMS. Because the teachers there are saying student readiness to learn at the beginning of the day, about the same. But end of the day, after school activities were providing academic supports, all of those, the most extreme negative far outweighed all the other votes. And that was the most striking to me. I thought it was interesting because there was a lot of parental support, as Stephanie said, for the schedule at AMS, but then a ton of way more people are being tardy. Like they're coming in later. And I guess that's because things have to get scheduled in the morning maybe now because they can't schedule them later. I don't know. But a lot more, I don't know, if there's one school it doesn't look like it's working on at paper, it's AMS. There seems to be a big disconnect here. And then you saw some of that at Sohegan, though a little less extreme for what you saw there. I guess one of the things I struggle with is my understanding as a community member back when this was all being considered is that the thought was everyone across the state is going to be doing this. So losing time at the end of the day, it's not going to be a problem because all sports are going to be held at different times and, everybody's going to do that. And that hasn't happened. I will say my kids in high school, my one who was impacted by it certainly enjoyed the additional sleep. But I'm struggling with the after school and the time lost and the loss of the instructional time.
Mr. Call.
So I'm, I guess, aligned with what Victoria and what our superintendent has said around not trying to pit two good research-based things against each other. And when we started this 2 years ago, one of the things I talked about was there were definitely going to be hurdles, and we knew that. I feel like we're getting over some of them, and there's still some hurdles left. And I don't want to throw away progress that we've made in one area because there's now hurdles in another area. I've listened to Mr. Chamberlain, and I feel like there are ways that we can solve this problem through compromise. And I think, no, it's okay. So, and I feel like when we talk about metrics, to me, the metrics that we have is the survey data as well. I don't think testing data, stuff like that, it's fair to look at because of all the variables that are entwined with that. Unless we do a really comprehensive study and we want to pay for that, I feel like it's going to be really hard to parse out what the effects of a late start are. But we have 60% of our Sauhegan families that are feel the most positive about their child's sleep. And only 17% of families feel neutral or negative about it. So the data is pretty clear from families. And so when I'm looking for, well, how do we evaluate this? I'm looking to our parents who are, in my view, the best guide, especially when we're talking about 11-year-olds. My 11-year-old, she would eat candy all day if she could, and, isn't necessarily the best judge of her own sleep patterns and things like that. So when I look to our families, I see really positive support for this. And I would hate to throw that away in order to fix another problem. There are hurdles. I feel like at AMS, one of the biggest challenges we have had is sports. I am really excited that Kelly Braley will be coming down to AMS to help us with that challenge. And I feel like that will make a real impact for AMS. So that's a place where I feel like this is going to get better by having an expert, someone whose job it is, not a stipend. And I'm nothing against that person, but it's a stipend worker right now, right? Not an expert, not somebody who's an athletic director. So having her down there, I feel like will help us get out over one of those hurdles that we still have. So my hope is that we can continue to move forward, make good change, and not pit these two things against each other, because I think we are seeing good results when we look at the survey for our parents of these kids who are getting the benefit from sleeping later, from their sleep cycles being aligned with where they are as human beings at this age. So that's my hope for this, is that we continue to figure out these challenges and get over those hurdles that still remain.
Mr. Goff here.
So I have a couple of things that one of them I'm going to touch on quickly just to make the point. We want to believe in the parents' opinions on this. Then why didn't we have this conversation 2 years ago when it came down to having parents' choice for masks? But I digress on that situation. We don't need to get back into that conversation now. So my bigger point is this is all anecdotal. So we have parents feel better because their kids are getting more sleep. To be honest with you, when my kids are being cranky and being a pain in the neck and they don't want to eat the dinner I made, sometimes I just want to get that box of mac and cheese and just say, to heck with it. Here you go. It makes my life a lot easier. Sure that there's some parents out there saying, oh, thank God I don't have to fight with Junior because he gets to sleep in an extra hour today. So that's not what's best for kids. I mean, if we're losing instructional time, that is a hard scientific fact that we're losing instructional time. If we're not going to look at test scores and we're not going to weigh this against everything going on, we can't keep saying pandemic. This is the third school year, for full school year, we've been dealing with the pandemic at this point. It's at some point we have to make a decision. I don't know that we can actually get this turned around and change this for next year is my concern at this point. So let's say we decide we want to get rid of start times. Can Amy work with the bus company to get a new bus schedule? Can we look at going to the 180 days? To me, this is one of those things where it's frustrating to me that this is probably in here for another year. But we vote tonight to say yes or no for continuing beyond that. But anyway, I rambled there at the end. Sorry.
Mr. Bay.
As I think there is nationally that there is some pretty good data that shows this is what's best for older children. And have we unfairly lumped AMS into that because of the busing issues that they're right there and we don't have to bus them across town? So we need fewer buses to do it if they join in with the high school. Is there some way we can do it without adding $500,000 to the busing budget to get them a later start time and maybe have some flexible start times at the high school so that if kids want to jump on the elementary school bus and get here 45 minutes earlier and have a class earlier in the morning, that may be an option, especially where a good number of them drive themselves anyway, maybe have some electives before the official start time. How flexible are we willing to be on stuff like that, and how flexible can we be?
Great question. So the big financial piece would be going a single tier K-12. That adds 5 buses, or whatever it was. That's the $500,000 gig. What I was talking about, to squeeze the hour, that's not the big ticket. I don't know how much that is. I've got Deb working on it, but it's not the big ticket. Regarding the ability to have like a class at, a class at 7:30, 8:30, right? Or, it's a very interesting question. There is a conversation to be had with PPC about what a teacher day looks like. Districts has been flexibility to look at, like in where I was, we added the ability to have a night class for kids because it was better for some to take some electives at night. So we added that. So it is possible to make a flexible working day for teachers. I don't think that's a barrier. It's interesting about having high school kids with elementary kids. I think it's all good. I think everything is on the table. Tom, to your point, to be honest, we try to do this now so we would have the on-ramp to make this change for next year. I mean, it was going to be February, but the weather. So I think, Deb knows we're having this conversation.
Okay.
The bus contract manager knows, because I talked with her 3 times last week about trying to get some data about this stuff.
Mr. Glover.
I'm inclined to continue watching this evolve and finding solutions. I think it's important to remember that the trade-off for the 20 minutes, Stephanie, was we took away the 20 minutes a day that were the baked-in snow days. Okay, maybe it wasn't 1-to-1. Those baked-in snow days were gone.
Just one person at a time.
I'm just saying there was effort. Maybe it wasn't enough to at least trim that a little bit. So that's why we have this snow day question. I mean, the students seem to like it. The parents seem to like it. To Josh's point, the science is pretty clear, as we've seen, and as members of the public have been showing us for a long time. Moving the advisory to the end of the day. Yeah, that sounds like an interesting.
Careful that when you struck my leg.
Sounds like an interesting idea. We talked about at the SAU meeting, moving the master schedule around, and you expressed some of the challenges with that, as Stephanie alluded to. What can we do in the community to get, to persuade others to join us? To Anna's point, maybe there's more effort we could do to talk to our competing athletic programs and the NHIAA and other people to try to ease our burden. I would rather attempt that for now and not just go back because it feels convenient, because there'll be other problems that will emerge just by flipping the switch and going back.
Thank you. And I'll just add my quick comments. And I felt when we first started talking about this quite a while ago, and it took us 2 years to implement it, that I knew this was going to be a process. And for us to give it literally a year and a half and make one of those years a COVID year, and then see whether or not it's successful or not, just would not be enough time. And so personally, I've always felt that this was a 5-year commitment that this board made at the time. Now, did I share that at the time? No, but it is a 5-year commitment because you're going to make small, subtle, incremental changes along the way to make it better, right? So last year we saw significant busing issues. We made it better. This year we're seeing releasing from our high school, from an athletic program. Our athletic director is making it better. Now, seeing that there's a loss of instructional time, we can make it better. And I think this board can charge our superintendent. And once we get up to full staffing over at the SAU office, we can then go ahead and say, what the heck can we do to make it better, more effective, more comprehensive from an instructional time standpoint that we can implement immediately, then we can implement over the course of next year, whether it be moving a class at the end of the day, whether it be maybe leveraging a conversation with one of our collective bargaining units to get some more time, canceling club time at the end of the day at our high school, making our end of day times look a little bit more identical between the middle school and high school. All those things should be on the table in an effort to make it better. To just go back and act like this never happened, it's not going to be, in my perspective, and I think a lot of parents that reached out to me over the last 3 weeks, it's not going to make that any better. It's just going to go back to the old way. We gave up, let's move on. And this was just another thing that we tried. I think this is something that's working for families. I think the data actually shows that. I think when you take a look at the students, it's actually working for the students from a data standpoint. The teachers reading the verbatims, I was a little taken back by some of the comments some of our professionals made, but I think we can make that better for them as well. So I think from my perspective tonight, keep the thing, the start times as is, make no significant changes that would modify or disrupt the learning community, and then empower our SAU office, especially being at full staff, to come up with positive incremental solutions that we can do over the course of the next year. And then next year will be year number 3, and then the year after will be year number 4. And if by the time we get to year number 5, and there's nothing that we could do to make it better, and this community feels that this was an error, then we change it. Then we go back. That's just my perspective. Ms. Cooley-Zimmerman.
I would love to, I agree with a lot of things you just said. I would love to see the numbers, and if there is a way to even scroll back to that 8 o'clock, like try to get a little bit more time for the upper. I mean, when I look at, and I'm a little torn because, when I look at Sauhegan, our parents and families are very much in favor of it. And the teachers were pretty neutral. They're like, yeah, it's a little bit worse at the end of the day, but a little bit better, but better at the beginning, balanced by better at the beginning of the day. I just, I don't know. Like, I wonder if you talked to the AMS parents and said, hey, I know you think this is great, but your teaching staff is really, really consistent that this is not good there, whether or not they might have a different perspective. Because I might have one perspective as a parent, sending my kid out the door, kid's happy, kid's getting extra sleep. And if I had a teacher who said to me, yeah, but your kid's showing up and they're not, they're really not any more prepared in the morning than they were before. And by the end of the day, they're a mess. And I really feel like this is setting them back. I might have a different perspective as a parent. And again, I don't know if this is a middle school, like Dan was mentioning, have we somehow got the middle school kids in the wrong group? Is there a fix for that? I don't know the answer to that, but the AMS disconnect was what struck me the most. I tend to agree with regard to the high school and the elementary schools that it seems to be more or less working, and we should give it time and keep doing improvements as we're able. But
Ms. Grant.
I just want to add the discussion we had with our athletic director and correct me if I'm wrong, but she has worked with other school districts and she's made the small changes that she can. And right now she's not sure, like if you looked at this year, she'd be able to move any more. What you have to watch is that like next year, where like maybe this year we're traveling to those faraway schools, next year they're coming to us. So it might look better, but then the next year we're going back to them. So we have to watch, I think, some of that stuff. So I don't know what she can do at the middle school, but it's definitely something she will have to absolutely look at. And I'm just going to be very clear, there will be no canceling of club time in my opinion. I just want to be very clear on that. That is something that is sacred at Sohegan, and I want to keep it there, and it needs to stay.
Ms. Parisi.
Just as an Amherst school board member, without fully understanding the club time, only observing at 3 o'clock, driving past and seeing many students leaving, is there a way to entice more students to really participate in those 25 minutes or anything like that? I'm just not sure.
Hardly make them longer than 25 minutes. 25 minutes, you know, by the time they get into a seat, like the coding club, it's 3:05, 3:10. What time are they taking off? Let's make it 3:45. Let's make it, you know, it used to be longer than 20 or 25 minutes, but we're trying to keep it in that time frame now. So there isn't as much of incentive. And it's been a little bit of a struggle at times. You know, other ones have tried to adjust to meet at different times. But I think us switching those start times did hurt clubs and the participation, which, you know, part of that whole club thing is we allow our athletes to participate in clubs. And that's why it's always been a very important time at Sohegan.
Thank you. Ms. Beam.
Yeah, I really appreciate the respectful conversation around this and the willingness to focus on how can we make changes rather than just throwing it all out like, well, we tried. So I do think it's a commitment. I do think that I really read comments, and because I'll be honest, I didn't know how it would land, right? And so one of them that really struck me was somebody that said, listen, it was painful for our family to figure this out, but we figured it out. And now if you change it again, please, for the love of all, don't, because at this point we've made it work. And I think it would be a disservice to our families and a disservice to our community to do another large change. And so I am wondering, how can we instead support our administration and support, could there be a tiger team that gets together and we discuss ideas, and that we definitely did a lot of work to get ready for this. We've done work for very specific areas that we know were issues. Is there any way that we can support you, Steve, you know, in administration, and anybody else, our principals, that we can work to make sure that we are moving forward in a positive way? Because I know that so much of this does fall on you, but since we're the decision makers, we're happy to lend our efforts as well to try to make it work.
Well, thanks. No, I like the ideas, and we'll continue whatever we serve with a pleasure. So we'll happily to keep moving on it, whatever we decide.
Steve, do we know what our vocational participation is? Has that gone up or down in the vocational programs with this?
Right.
I don't know what it's called.
Is that?
It's called CTE now.
Yeah, no,
Whatever. Steve, you taught in a one-room brick school for 15 hours a day. You should know what vocational tech
No, I'm
is.
with you. I was on it. Don't worry.
Okay.
I was totally with you. So the actually the later start time helped reduce the conflict with receiving schools, but the kids had to leave earlier before. You know what I mean? Like they left like at 7:30. Or 8, and so it helped, but it did not change our numbers.
Okay.
So our numbers have not changed because of that, but there was less loss of class time for those who travel to Nashville.
Great. We'll go to Ms. Peters and then we'll wrap it up.
Yeah, you circled around this, so I sort of understood it, but it sounded like maybe we didn't know yet about if you just moved the secondary start time back 15 minutes, that there might be some busing cost, but you're not saying the 500,000.
Correct.
So when would you know that number?
I've got Deb working on it as we speak, to create a additional wave of buses for the second tier. And I haven't checked in with her since vacation, but before vacation, I asked her, look, what would it take to reduce the time from the littles to 45 minutes as opposed to the hour. And she's working on it, but I don't have the number. Sorry,
No, that's,
but I tried.
but I'm inclined to give you the 15 minutes. It's a lot over 170 days.
No, it is. I like 15 minutes. 15 minutes is huge in my life. I'm not anti.
I think, Mr. Eckhoff, you started to raise your hand and I apologize for cutting you off.
No, that's fine. Real quick, just point of information about the sports and the other schools. My expectation when we voted on this was we did not expect the rest of New Hampshire to follow like dominoes.
At least not in 2 years.
Exactly. So I won't speak for the board, but I'll speak for myself. There was never that expectation. The sports thing was one of my big contentions was, and we had the AD here to talk about what the impact was. I agree with Steve. I think we should stay the course. I will say this, I'm a little perplexed. If there's only 4 other districts in the state that are doing this, and if the science is so overwhelmingly positive to this, why aren't they jumping in? And I'm not saying that's right or wrong, but we should have.
No, this is a very divisive topic.
I know.
And I appreciate what Terry said, the civil nature of this place. I was connected to Keene a little bit when Keene was going after it. It was very, very divisive in the community.
Yeah.
So, and it's just out of all the things to take on, this is a 50, it's a 51-49 thing. No, you know what I mean? It's just hard. But that's why. And we've just got other alligators to wrestle, but we're wrestling this one here.
And one last comment I'd make is that there's studies out there too that have been out there forever regarding kids who do participate in sports or participate in club activities or extracurriculars, however you want to define them. And they tend to perform better academically because they manage their time better. They have to or they get buried. So I understand your concerns about, I'm looking at the sheet right here about early dismissal, days missed, and it all cumes up. I got it. But again, there's multiple hundreds, thousands of studies over the years that kids who participate in other things besides being in a classroom tend to perform better than the ones that don't. Thank you for the time.
Last comment, Ms. Coolidge.
And along those lines, I am on, probably going to be stepping onto a third rail here, but I would be happy to have a conversation about the club time. I think part of the balancing of time and learning to manage your different responsibilities is not necessarily making that time immediately easy and accessible and within what counts as your school days so that people can just leave and go home early and not do it. And there are people who are doing it. I completely understand that. But, I look at the mock trial kids and they came down 6 to 7:30 Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, all falling up until the competition, and so, and I'm not suggesting everybody has to do that either, but I would rather have strong clubs that are successful and go for an hour or whatever, and have those kids going home on the late bus than having them end quickly because we're trying to fit them into an artificially short time and we're losing instructional time by doing that. And I understand that means there are going to be people who at certain parts of the year are going to have to make choices on do they do a sport or do they do a club. But in my opinion, that's one of the, that's part of adulting and that's part of learning to adult. And I think our clubs have always been very, very open on if someone does a fall sport, of course you can join when your sport ends. So I think there is room there to look at what we can do.
Okay, thank you. So let's go ahead and consider a motion here in terms of what we want to do or instruct our superintendent to do over the course of the next year. There's a couple of ones that have been recommended in his memo to us, and that's deciding on the school start times. So the first motion could be something like, hey, let's continue status quo, or go back to the way we were, or I think, Christy, to address your 15-minute piece, I think that could be accomplished in number 2, request an investigation into different models that could increase instructional time, and then he can come back and say that we would like to make a modification in 6 months or 2 months or next year. So I think from that piece, I think we can successfully capture in the second part But for the first part, just making a decision about where our school start time should be for the 2023 and the 2024 school year, and then address the other piece in number 2. Is there a motion? Mr. Vayu.
I'd like to make the motion that you just came up with, that we would, I think it was to keep the 2023, 2024 as is, but look into other alternatives for.
Yep. Can we fragment
subsequent
the
years.
second part of that out for the second motion, if that's okay?
We-
So
that we-
the first
I
motion,
move that we keep the status quo for the next school year.
great.
I second the motion.
Thank you. Second, Mr. Glover, discussion.
The discussion would be, if we're going to make the action to decide that the school start time is unchanged, I don't understand how we then can make a second motion to change it by.
I think the logic's pretty simple, because if we can come back and Mr. Chamberlain's got time and they're like, hey, we need more time, the community needs to know what schools are going to start at next year, right? And so if we're committed to keeping a delayed, or I don't want to call it delayed start time anymore, because it's not, our current start times, right? If we're committed to doing that, we want to share that with the community, that we are committed to doing the current start times. And if the superintendent needs 3 months, 2 months, 1 week to determine whether or not, hey, I can add 15 minutes back into the calendar, he can then report to us at our next meeting to say, hey, I can do it. I can accomplish it. Or you know what? I'm going to need more time because of this. And I think that could be the piece that we can accomplish in the second part. So-
And I'm just, the second part, I believe, requires funding that is not in anybody's claim.
So the 15 minutes is expensive.
So it's,
So
well,
it has to come out.
it's
It's going to cost more.
a big money.
It's some amount. So we'd look at that for next year.
Right, I envision
Yes.
that as the next iteration in preparing budgets. And so I apologize for being unclear about that.
So I would say the second motion is making a motion about the 24-25 school year.
That's what I understood.
And I think
Sure.
that I would understand and absolutely agree.
But time will be vote.
Okay. Any more discussion on this motion first? And you just check Terry real fast. Terry real fast.
Oh, sorry.
Great, perfect. All right, let's go ahead and call the vote. We're going to go slow because Steve's going to be doing some data entry here. Because I don't know if it's going to be close or not, but Mr. Torres.
Torres, yes.
Thank you.
Glover,
Glover.
yes.
Mr. Vayu,
Vayu, yes.
Mr. Gronstra, Ms. Peters,
Peters, yes.
Ms. Grund,
That's really low.
I'm going to say yes because of the second motion.
great. Mr. Eckhoff,
Eckhoff, yes.
Ms. Galea Zimmerman,
Lay. Zimmerman, yes.
O'Keefe, yes.
Conklin, yes.
Gracie, yes.
White, yes.
Lawrence, yes.
Gothier, no.
Ms. Beam,
Beam, yes.
that motion carries. Yes. All right, the second motion, Mr. Vayu, if you'd like to make that as well, craft the language there. And then Danae, I want to make sure you capture that. So if you don't, just let me know and we'll go back.
I need some guidance from you on it, that we will
Instruct,
investigate alternatives to add time.
so we can use the exact language that he has there.
Yeah.
And then just add in the 2024-25 school year.
So moved.
So-
Read it. I don't have.
You might want to read it for.
The reading is to request investigation into different models that may increase instructional time and still respect the research for the 2024-2025 school year. Is that acceptable?
That's what I will move.
Danae, do you have that? Great. Second, Ms. Peters seconds, discussion. Ms. Grund.
I just want to be clear that we'll look at different models and not just the 15 minutes being
Yeah,
added. We're going to look
yeah.
at a variety. Okay.
And I'd like to see us try to do this in a way that doesn't cost extra money. If you can do that, then you're a magician, because the way that I look at this, 180 days, extra buses, there's no way that you're getting out of this for less than a significant contribution in 6 figures.
Yep.
Which I know was something we had talked about when we implemented this, was that it wasn't going to do that. At least that's in my mind. So
You're right.
this is a little frustrating that now we're going to have this conversation. And the only way to make this work, because of the severe reduction of educational time, is to spend more money and throw more money at it for something that we're not even concerned is producing an academic result. Or we're not studying what kind of academic result we're getting at the high school level for it. So.
And Mr. Gothier, just to add to the back of that, the good thing about having this conversation tonight and actually passing this motion, it allows that conversation to go through our budget process. go through the community, allow the community to provide feedback and determine whether or not the community, whether they do or don't support that. It gives us as board members a better lens in terms of how our constituents feel about the
And
issue.
so if budgets get voted down in a year and a half,
Going to be
then
very,
we like start times. We don't want to pay extra money for it, but we don't care about educational time, but we want higher test scores. I mean, this is just a nasty, fun little circle that we're going to be in 18 months. So, or in 12 months, 12 months in a week.
Mr. Glover.
Yeah, I'm in support of the motion of studying, being creative. I would encourage you to be creative. To Anna's point, I would assume nothing is sacred. And if you present reasons and rationale for keeping things. I mean, Mike Barry at the high school, maybe you all don't know this on the other boards, but he was reviewing how time was spent at Sauhegan in the classroom and outside of the classroom. We still are looking forward to his findings on that. And I think that that's really important, and things that you keep, you justify. Things that you are potentially expendable, you also justify, so that when we have your feasibility study, we have a high level of confidence that that you've looked at all the opportunities and are presenting truly the best recommendations going forward.
Thank you. Any more discussion? Ms. Beam? That's okay. Great.
Yeah, I don't have anything unique to say. I would echo what everyone is saying in that I do think everything should be on the table.
Thank you.
I'd like to just add one more thing, that somehow we know dismissals have gone up, but somehow with more sleeping time, tardies have gone up as well. So add to the conundrum mix into there, that.
Starting off with Mr. Torres, again, going slow. Mr. Torres.
Torres, yes.
Mr. Glover.
Glover, yes.
Mr. Vayu.
Vayu, yes.
Mr. Gronstra. Ms. Peters.
Peters, yes.
Ms. Grund.
Grund, yes.
Mr. Eckhoff.
Eckhoff, yes.
Ms.
Zimmerman, yes.
O'Keefe, yes.
Conklin, yes.
Parisi, yes.
White, yes.
Lawrence, yes.
Gothier, yes.
Ms. Beam.
Beam, yes.
Great, that motion carries. All right. Thank you very much for that dialogue. And let's move on to board requested time from Mr. Glover. Mr. Glover requested 5 minutes on tonight's agenda. Mr. Glover, those 5 minutes are yours.
Thank you. Wish I didn't have to request these minutes. I requested them because at our November 21, 2022 meeting, SAU board meeting, Amherst School District member Terry Beam read into the record a statement about the events involving the SAU's violation of its own sexual harassment policy against me that has embroiled the school system for more than 15 months and counting, and has incurred legal fees of nearly $70,000 so far. I voted in support of publicly releasing all the entire record in the spirit of transparency back at a meeting last fall. I regret that vote now because of Terry's comments. And to the extent allowed by law, I rescind my vote in support of disclosing the record, because the record was generated in violation of federal law and our policy. And as a consequence, I will forever and unfairly have to be on the lookout for the types of selective narrative presented by Terry Beam, which contain many untrue and disingenuous statements and sentiments that necessitate my response. We don't have time to list all of them, but I will give a few examples. Terry Beam claims that I am like a boss to employees of the SAU 39. There's nothing farther from the truth. No individual board member controls the time, manner, and place of anybody's employment, including the superintendent. Terry Beam claims that I did not reach out for a solution. This is not true. I reached out immediately to find a solution, and my actions since then have been geared towards a solution. Terry Beam leveled irrelevant criticism against me, that criticism about I stayed in the room after the noise came out of my phone, that I gave no reasons for this and assumed what I may or may not have been doing before the meeting. The fact is that I reported what happened, as we all should do, and as SAU and constituent district staff and students are required to do per our policy AC. The fact is that what everyone else thinks about what one should or should not do in that type of situation is irrelevant, because the people who were in that room chose not to file a formal complaint, which was their right. Formal complaint is unambiguously required for proceeding with the grievance process, including an investigation that was leveled against me. Terry Breen presented the lack of a formal complaint as a technicality, as the difference between choosing blue ink or black ink. Yet a formal complaint is not a complicated process. The employees who did not wish to file a formal complaint, period. That was their choice under these circumstances. If what the employees want doesn't matter to you, then you are saying to them that your voice is superior to theirs. This is a disrespectful disposition and actually damages progress towards gender equality. Terry Bean claims that I refused repeated requests to discuss facts, that I was dismissive about the event, and that I caused delay. This is not true. I was fighting for the integrity of our system. I never discussed the underlying events, but rather notifying the board and anyone who might listen about the ignoring of the board's decision, the policy violation, and the resulting damages. Finally, in my summary of examples, Terry attempts to distinguish the notion of a threat versus a statement of fact. And she uses the following analogy, quote, "You must clean your room to go out to ice cream after dinner," a parent might say to their child. This, of course, is an incentive to act based on a clear authority and an honest sentiment. The fact here is the so-called choices presented to me were based on false pretense, namely that complaints had been filed against me. In fact, none had been filed when Chair O'Keefe made the threat, and none was ever filed subsequently. The fact is that the threat delivered by Chair O'Keefe was a bullying tactic, a fraud on the people, and strong evidence of malintent. That concludes my statement.
Great. Moving on to our matter with regards to our policy committee and our Resolve Title IX matter. Our policy committee had met multiple times over the past several months to produce a document which was provided to all board members in advance of tonight for your review and discussion. Ms. Lawrence, I'm going to turn the floor over to you to at least explain the process in which you guys followed and answer any questions from the report's findings and perspective, because I believe there's a couple of recommendations.
Sure. I just have on my screen right now the report that you all should have received. I'm not going to read you everything that's here, but you know the gist. You were here when we were charged with reviewing the process and the procedures from the incident on November 9th, 2021. You can see our process here. The subcommittee had one conversation with the SAU 39 Title IX coordinator, Meg Beauchamp. We had one public meeting and completed one final informal review of the document that's presented to you here. All of our minutes and notes, I can't say they were formal minutes, but you've got all of the gist of the conversations that we had with Meg Beauchamp. You have the bullet point notes from the posted meeting on the 18th. And then you have the informal review and the final edits of the document that's in front of you. We organized it so that you can see the contents of the document, the historical, what happened, basically, the history of what occurred, the findings and recommendations, and then the appendix, which is the minute meetings and the notes. I'm actually going to turn it over to Anna because she did a beautiful job organizing this document. So if you want to highlight anything from here, I think that would be helpful. And then perhaps if we want to turn it over for questions. And Josh, if you've got anything to chime in, we've worked together on the document.
So first I'd say that, as you notice from our kind of history of things, what we're looking at is mostly what should be considered if a similar issue arises? How should we deal with these things? And not only this, but other issues that these same recommendations might make some sense on. And I will say, I'm just going to comment on what John said earlier. One of the things that struck me when I read the packet of all the information was that I understand why people thought there was a formal complaint, because we had hired an attorney who was saying, I have given you a formal complaint. And she is an attorney, and she is the person we hired as the expert. Two other attorneys, when they became the fact finder, disagreed, but there was a professional who was saying this is a complaint within them. So we didn't really focus a lot on, was it a complaint? Was it a complaint? What applied in this case? But really more on the lessons that can be brought forward to other circumstances. So I'm just going to run through them, I guess. I'll go run through them quickly, and then if people have comments. On initial communications with the board, I think we were all in favor of, as much as possible, at least if everybody has notice on what policies might be at issue, because ACAC is a really long policy. So if there's time ahead of time to read through the policies, know what policies are at issues, and when possible, whatever the underlying events might be. Again, not in huge detail, but this is what we're going to be discussing. And this would cover a wide variety of things that might be coming from the board. It might not be a complaint against a board member. It might be almost anything that arises that involves, policies ahead of time. So we're not all here in this setting trying to get up to speed. Communications with counsel, we recognize that this is a little bit difficult because what ended up happening is we had one individual who was having those communications on behalf of the board. And that puts a lot of pressure on that individual. That puts a lot of responsibility on that individual. And it somewhat diminishes one of the big strengths of a board. I mean, I will tell you, one of my big strengths is not knowing whether something should be an assigned or unassigned thing on a budget. I don't, I have to ask questions about that. Stephanie probably knew that answer and was thinking, yeah, Anna, duh. I mean, probably understood that the second she looked at it. I understand some of the legal things that we come across more than other people might. And we all have different strengths. So we talked about, this kind of comes down to the end idea of kind of having a ethics committee, where there's one person from each board who would be involved in these discussions. It would be a group decision. You'd have that kind of multiple people giving multiple perspectives and providing, someone who you can bounce ideas off of, you can talk about within your group to try to have a good, multiple views and multiple perspectives and make sure everything's covered. One of the things that we did think is that we hired Sarah Helsted, it would have been useful, and we ought to do this before, to define a little more clearly what her role was. And I think everybody on this board had a clear intent. It seemed clear at the time, but then when you see where she kind of ran with it as far as, no, I'm also acting, I've been hired, and the paperwork did say, as a investigator, a little bit more when we're hiring attorneys in the future, looking at, and I think this covered a couple of different things, looking at, is the scope of the representation really, really clearly defined? If we want one step and then the next step, let's set that out. And I think it's later. And if there's going to be at least a preliminary, this is the amount, there should actually be a vote on that. Because I know you all probably heard my husband multiple times out there saying and asking the question of, look, you all authorized up to $6,000. Who authorized the rest of this money? We didn't authorize up to $6,000. We said, go do it. We thought that was what the best guess of what the cost would be, but it wasn't a specifically authorized amount. So if the idea is that at some point we're hiring someone, or for any purpose like this, an outside attorney or some other professional, and we expect there to be some sort of cap or limit, or at least a check-in before you spend beyond this, that ought to be explicit in the pleading, in the paperwork. We talked about the fact that I understand John's position on his communications with Sarah Helsted. We talked about the fact that to some extent allowed this timeline to get dragged on. One of the things that Meg Beauchamp explained to us is that in kind of a normal proceeding, it's like, we get the information from this person, we get the information from this person, we make the decision. And if one of those people doesn't want to participate, they don't participate. They say, this is my issue. I don't think you've got this. I don't think there's a formal complaint. I'm not participating. And you move on. And instead, we ended up with a really long time period because that didn't happen. And there was allowed to be this kind of ongoing, yeah, come back, let's get more information. That we thought she could have actually concluded her investigation significantly quicker. So we said in the future, we should be clear again in what we expect if we're using policy ACAC or another applicable policy following the timelines. And I think we'd recommended, and I may be jumping around a little bit here, that we ask Meg or maybe administration to come up with kind of a checklist. So if you're applying, if that she can use to show I've done this, and this when she's applying ACAC, and if someone else is having to look at it, that we do the same thing. We did think it would be useful if we have a similar situation in the future, or even one, that's just analogous, to separate out the coordinator and the investigator roles, just so there's no even appearance of a conflict of interest. Because it could be seen that someone might have a motive, and I am in no way saying this was what was motivating our attorney in this case, but it could be seen as someone having a motive to proceed with the investigation because they get to keep billing for it instead of saying, okay, my part is done, and passing it off to someone else. We talked about trying to share information as much as possible. And that was again where the ethics committee came up, because if it is information that can't be shared with the full board because the board's going to be a decision maker, at least it would give a wider perspective of individuals who could be having that information. The ethics committee we already talked about. We did not recommend any change. And the ethics committee, I think, is probably the big takeaway. A lot of this kind of flows from that. But again, because that gives multiple people who could look at decisions, make recommendations, and implement some of the things that we've talked about. Like, is this clear enough in this situation? We are not recommending any changes to ACAC or BCA. The main thing on this is, folks, not diminished, but it's federal law. We can't just on our own decide we're going to change the requirements of Title VII. BCA is a board policy, and although it would be, maybe nice for it to have more teeth, there's only so much we can do with board members. And we gave you the 2 RSAs that apply. Those are the only reasons people like us can be removed from these seats. So there's not really, we can't really change BCA and say, and therefore, if you violate it, ABC, because we're not empowered. We don't have statutory authority to do more than say, hey, can you please make sure you're following the policy? We don't, appreciate what you're doing or respect what you're doing in some given situation. We want to remind everyone to please make sure that if there are confidential issues or issues where the boards are going to be acting as decision makers, we should be really careful about what we're sending out via email. It was, in this case, a lot of electronic communications as well as verbal ones that ended up with the disqualification process. But this was more just a reminder. We did not go back and go through every one of those to see if there was anything that might have been verged on confidential, but just remember that was more, again, not looking at this situation so much, but looking forward, just a reminder to everyone not to, be careful what we put out in communications, because those are, we just have a requirement to do that. And then I think I already talked about the authorization of funds being specific in the ACA checklist earlier, but those were our recommendations. And I think, Josh and Sarah, if I missed anything or if I misstated anything, feel free to correct me. And otherwise, I don't know. I'm happy to take questions.
Mr. Conklin?
No, I think it's one.
Great. Mr. Vane.
Thank you. I think you guys did a good job on this. I definitely agree with the ethics committee. I think that would help alleviate some of the issues that we have in perception anyway. One of the other things that we might want to recommend, and this is going by the legislative sexual harassment policy is, it doesn't have to be an attorney doing the investigation. It can be any professional, human resources professional. So we might be able to get away with it, you know, and the investigation part of it a little less than $350 an hour. So to look, you know, to kind of specify that somewhere in the policy that, so we don't get kind of strung out into hiring an attorney at a much higher rate than we should otherwise expect. And the other thing that the legislative sexual harassment policy points out is that there may be no possible disciplinary action just because of the nature of the position. But whatever, you know, at the legislative level, you can be removed from your committee assignments. I don't know if we have that ability here, because then we're taking away the ability of the person to serve as a functional board member, which they were elected to be. So just some thoughts.
Thank you. Ms. Grunt.
So, thank you. I think you guys did a great job with the write-up. I agree with the ethics committee. I think that's a great idea to kind of let a collective group work together to relieve the pressure of everything being under one person. So I think that's a great idea. One of the things I remember, and I don't know if this is worth throwing in there or this, you know, hopefully this never happens again, sort of thing. But one of the reasons that we couldn't be decision makers, this is what our attorney told us, we were not trained in Title IX either. That wasn't in here, but one of the things he told us was we're not trained in Title IX. So it would be very difficult for us to be a decision maker in this. So I think we need to be careful on that and whether we need, if that ever comes up again, do we need training? Or do we get another outside person that's necessarily attorney that can act in that role?
Can I ask a question? Was that with regard to the decision maker part or with regard to the initial determination?
If it came to us from the report.
So if you remember, we were told that we'd all have to go through training prior to
Right.
that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, so that
Got
was, I just want to say, because it said decision was forced the board to hire.
That's the gap I was missing because I was there for that. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
part of the reason was we also
Mhm.
trained, so we won't be able to great decision maker. Yeah, and the other thing I just want to be, to me, I just want to make sure it's very clear is Mr. Glover's actions caused a delay. True, but Sarah also did not follow ACAC. So I want to be clear that it's not just him. She should have cut him off.
No, that's, I think that's what,
Months earlier. And that
absolutely.
caused a huge part of this overspending.
No,
So, but thank you. I really do appreciate the work on this and I love the idea of the ethics committee.
thank you. Mr. Gothier.
Just on point 6 and 7, they can be one point. Your ethics committee probably should just make it your chairs of the 3 boards and then the chair of the SAU board. It brings you back down to 13 people on the overall boards. That's probably the easiest and cleanest way to do it, but just a thought.
Thank you. Ms. Bean.
Yeah, I want to echo everyone in my thanks for the work that went into these recommendations and for the very clear way that you laid out the work that you had done, so it was understandable for us. And I guess my question now is, could we make a motion to accept the recommendations with some slight recommendations of our own for them, some of the amendments that were just suggested, or what's our I guess my question is, what's our next step?
So my assumption is that we would have to do a referral back to policy to craft a ethics committee policy, that we would have to reach out to other examples, or maybe the school board association to get some versions of that. And then the policy committee can then go ahead and craft it specific to us. And so I think today the motion would be to accept the report as written and then make a referral back to policy to craft and create a policy surrounding a new ethics committee. Does that seem proper to the 3 of you? Yep.
Could I make that motion?
Sure.
Then I would like to make that motion, please.
Great. Danae, do you have that? And would there be a second on accept the report? We'll do Mr. Gothier because I saw him first. And again, the motion on the floor is to accept the report as written and then move the ethics committee back to policy. to craft and create a policy to present to the full SAU board. Okay, discussion. Mr. Torres.
So quick question. So out of the policy committee, one of the things they may look at is whether that ethics committee would be ad hoc or it would be an existing. So in other words, it would be assembled depending on if the situation arose, or it would be a regulatory. Does that make sense?
Yeah. It makes sense for you guys to explore the policy committee at the time, to explore all the various options out there and then present them back to this body for recognition that they feel is the most appropriate. Great. Any other comments before we call the vote? Mr. Glover.
I cannot accept the document as written, although I do appreciate the work of the subcommittee. It's not that I don't appreciate your work, but you know, you frame it as that the delays were caused by me. I don't think that's true. I think your procedural history is maybe a little brief. It doesn't cite the correct test for somebody who is going to sign a formal complaint on behalf of someone else. For example, I won't go through all of my objections, but as written, I can't support it. I mean, I think whatever subcommittee you will ultimately form, they don't make decisions. They only bring recommendations. And I did not certainly force the board to find another outside attorney. If it is ever the case where board members have a legitimate belief that the board policies are not being followed and that board decisions are not being followed, and they're silenced from talking about it, then we've got a serious problem. And if you go back and listen and learn and read everything that I said, every email that I put out there is only exclusively about that. So rue the day when it becomes our norm, and that's our goal is to engender trust with our community. That type of behavior does not help the situation. It hurts the situation.
Thank you. Any other comments? Ms. Collier.
I just like to say that I think we were pretty clear, if you look at number 4, that we recognize John had a right to raise any of the issues that he wanted to raise. But that we wished our attorney had not continued to engage the extended debates. So that was, I do want to be clear about that. So I just want to draw that point.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Seeing none. Did you raise your hand? No. Okay, sorry. Yes, starting off, Mr. Torres.
Torres, yeah.
Glover, no.
Hey, yes.
Ross, yes.
Peters, yes.
Run, yes.
Eckhoff, yes.
Glaze Zimmerman, yes.
O'Keefe, yes.
Conklin, yes.
Reese, yes.
White, yes.
Lawrence, yes.
Gothier, yes.
Beam, yes.
Great. We're going to move on to our third public comment period. 3 of 3. If any members of the public would like to address the board, come up to the mic or raise your hand using the online feature through Zoom. Just one. We're going to take that person next. We're going to go to Mr. Fergus first. Great. If you could just state your name, tell them what you reside, and you'll have the floor for 3 minutes.
Dwayne Purvis, Amherst. Thank you again for this opportunity. One of the big problems I have with this body is that you're not a school board, and I've said that many times. And you'll say at the beginning of next year that we want to think as one. One size does not fit all. With discussion that you just had about start times and busing, there's plenty of evidence. And I know in this SAU, it appears that things have to be invented that already exist and work throughout the rest of the world. The circadian rhythms, and this discussion has gone on for more than 10 years, of teenagers is different than that of elementary students. It just is. And at the same time, we talked about scores, test scores ad nauseum. You're right. And we shouldn't be talking about test scores. We should be doing the right thing. And you can't take away 66 hours and 40 minutes from a high school student and expect that they're going to perform well. Okay? Their performance goes on a transcript. Test scores also accompany that. And there's a lot of discussion how important it is. It is important, like it or not. But one size does not fit all. So if the high school district or those at secondary level have to do something that's appropriate for their students, they need to do that. And this organization can no longer be a bully. Your job is to serve the SAU. To meet every month, you have an obligation to meet twice a year, but you choose to do what you do. You're not the school board. The school boards, you have three distinct interests here that need to be satisfied, and they're not all the same. So again, one size does not fit all. And this is one of those cases. With respect to this John Glover thing, you know, I appreciate the work that's been done, but this was I don't know, it was a train wreck or what, but there was a decision that this guy did something and we're going to embarrass him and we're going to run him through the mud. And you know what? What you did was you wasted at least $70,000 in taxpayer dollars. And I don't hear anybody apologizing to John because there was no there, or to the community, or any idea, any discussion whatsoever to try and fix this thing. But, you know, let's just go on and try again. Guys, we can do better. There are a lot of good people here. Let's think about what's best for our communities, and not so much that we want to create, I don't know a better word for it, a communist state where we all think the same and we all move in the same direction. We can do better. Let's think about the individuals. The Amherst School District has its needs. The Mount Vernon School District has its needs. The Sauhegan Cooperative has its needs, and they're not the same, especially when it comes to this busing thing. You owe John an apology, and you owe the community an apology. Thank you.
Thank you. We have one member from the public online. KJ, you're gonna have to take your video and put your video on, and then state your name, your full name, and then town in which you reside. And then you'll have the floor for 3 minutes.
Hi, good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, you can.
Okay, great. Kelly Mullen, Amherst. So I'm sitting here listening to the taxpayers are going to be on the hook for $70,000 for this investigation. And I'm incredibly troubled by that. And I'd like to refer back to the last meeting that I attended in person. I heard Stephanie Grund mention the board should consider hiring new counsel. I have not heard any further discussion about the board considering that. Clearly we have bad legal counsel, right? I mean, we got very, very bad legal advice. And you're now asking the taxpayers to come out in a few days and vote yes for all of these really important needs for the schools. Facilities needs, academic needs, supporting our instructional staff. And we can't trust you. So I'm not voting yes for any of that because I am incredibly disgusted by the irresponsible conduct of this board, all of you. And I'm especially disgusted by the two board members who were involved in this happening and the conduct of Terry Boehm to continue the rants and the drama. I mean, the last meeting, her statement was absolutely disgusting. She does not need to use a school board meeting as personal therapy. I am sorry for whatever she may have gone through in her life, but that is not to be put on display here. And I hope the taxpayers are watching this, and I hope they vote her out on the 14th because we need a new person on this school board, and it doesn't need to be her. Thank you.
Thank you. Sure. State your name, town in which you reside. You'll have the floor for 3 minutes.
All righty. Anthony Nino, Amherst. So I'm wondering where exactly the $70,000 comes from inside the budget. Now, just a real, don't be afraid to use budgetary terminology. I'm the treasurer for a resort hotel here in New Hampshire, and I've been on the board 8 years. When one account is short or we come upon an unexpected expense, like, hey, the boiler blew up in the barn, something like that, we have to explain quite publicly where that money's going to come from. Now, I don't think that our annual budget has a capital reserve fund for unexpected legal expenses. Am I correct?
That's correct.
That's correct. So that $70,000 has to come from somewhere else. Am I correct?
Yes.
Can you please explain to the public, if not to me, where that $70,000 came out of? Because as a taxpayer, I've lived in town 24 years. And if you've lived in this town for 1 year or anywhere in southern New Hampshire where you can hear talk radio, you know that SAU 39 is always pining over the tax rate, the budget, and plenty of people who are objecting to taxes going up. And so it is always said that the budget is as lean as possible. So in a budget with no fat, where does $70,000 come from?
So it was spread over 2 years. So fiscal year last year and fiscal year this year. And this year's contributions came from the leftover surplus from our superintendent that departed.
Now, normally, wouldn't that money go back to the taxpayers?
It would.
And is this board authorized to spend, as board or even by department, monies in a manner that is not voted or approved by the taxpayers?
In this particular case, yes.
And what exactly empowers the board to do that? Or I should say legally enables the board to do that?
So the point of public comment is to share your feedback and your thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
You and I could talk after and we can answer as many questions you want. We can refer you to our superintendent, go deeper in terms of the budget and answer.
Okay, then my comment will be, this board owes this community, every taxpayer, a very specific explanation down to the dollar where this money has come from. Because I hate paying more for anything than I have to. And when I'm told that the budget is as lean as possible, I handle over $1 million a year for 42 efficiency units, docks on Lake Winnipesaukee, multiple campuses. When I vote for money to go somewhere, I want it to go there. And I want it to be held in trust. I want you to hold on to that dollar, every single dollar, like it's an egg and you're walking across a highway. And when I see $70,000 of unexpected expenses paid out, I don't feel like this board or prior boards has been doing so. And I believe that this board owes the public an explanation, very specifically on that expenditure.
Thank you. Any other comments from the public in attendance or online? Great, seeing none. One quick public comment before we move into non-public. I want to recognize two of our board members who are not returning to us next month. One of them being Mount Vernon's representative, Mr. Gronstra. After many years of service to this community and my community, your community, Mount Vernon, thank you on behalf of your colleagues here. Your service is not only appreciated, but has been, really, really appreciated by not only us, but the folks in Amherst and Mount Vernon because of your deep knowledge of not only our school system. You're the dean of this board, the longest turning tenured representative, and your recollection of history and how you bring that to conversations is going to be missed. And thank you for all the time and dedication you've given to us and hours upon hours. Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. I appreciate that. I do have a few notes that I just wanted to kind of review. Hold on, seriously. Here we go. But being on the board for 13 years, I've seen a lot. Think we've done a lot of good things, with various board makeups. I know there's been hiccups along the way, some explanations of some certain things that need more explanation. Sure, get that. And there's been some difficult times. I've had multiple thoughts of resigning prior to the end of my terms. But no, I knew what I was getting into when I signed up for this, so I figured I'd stick it out and hold my head high and strong. The one thing I will say is that no regrets about anything, no regrets about my time on the board. There are a lot of good things, met a lot of good people, met a lot of people I probably wouldn't have met and just hanging out in Mount Vernon, that's for sure. So I don't regret any of my time on the board, and I also don't regret finishing my time on the board. So I appreciate everybody, and thank you.
Great, thanks, Pep. And next, this board's vice chair, Mr. Conklin, and the amount of effort and passion you bring not only to the Amherst community, but to this board, and it's appreciated in Mount Vernon from him and I's perspective, and Sarah's perspective and Peter's perspective, but really from your cohorts here in Amherst. Your ability to craft and use your skill of language and words means a lot, and it's clearly something that we're going to miss on this board next year. And so the dedication you give to us and the dedication you gave to your fellow citizens, we're in awe. So thank you very much for that as well.
Tim, so I didn't come prepared. I get, yeah, I know I could have done that, but I appreciate all the time here. I really have enjoyed the good work that we've done, and I look forward to the good work you all and the future board will continue to do. And I guess I would just share, something that Steve Coughlin always said was the most good for the most students, and I feel like that is what we try to do here. And I really have appreciated being able to be a part of that work. So thank you very much.
And then we have several board members that are on the ballot this year. Wish you all best of luck, and the community will make the best decision that they are empowered to do. So with that said, let's move into non-public. We're going to go under RSA 91A3 2 subsection A. We're going to need a motion in a second and then go roll call.
Motion.
Motion by Ms. Grunt, seconded by Mr. Gronstra. Starting off with Ms. Torres.
Torres, yes.
Glover, yes.
Yeah, yes.
Peters, yes. Ron, yes.
Goff, yes. Delay Zimmerman, yes.
O'Keefe, yes.
Conklin, yes.
Parisi, yes.
White, yes.
Lawrence, yes.
Gothier, yes.
Ms. Beam.
Beam, yes.